Chapter 922. Treasury. At this moment, the giant crystal throne suddenly disappeared. When Jian Chen and Thisnik fought, someone had utilized the throne to mask themselves, approaching it silently from one side. They had stored the throne in their space ring and immediately fled into the distance excitedly. A sharp killing intent flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. With the illusory flash, he became a lightning-fast blur and caught up with the person. Jian Chen's sword suddenly stabbed out, piercing through the person's back. The person roared out as the grand power of a Saint King surged from his body. It quickly formed a suit of armor on him, while a portion of the power condensed into an 8-centimeter wide energy ball in his left hand. It radiated with terrifying power. "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, if you're going to keep pressuring me, I'll die with you today," the person yelled as he attempted to threaten Jian Chen with the ball of energy. However, Jian Chen completely ignored his threats. He stabbed at the armor with his king armament. Ding! The collision between the weapon and the armor led to the screeching of steel, and a powerful force blew the person away. It covered his armor with cracks, before it disintegrated with a loud sound. The person fell heavily several dozen meters away. He was stunned when he saw that his armor had completely shattered. He knew exactly how powerful the defense of the armor was, as it had been condensed from the power of a Saint King. It could even remain unscathed after resisting the attacks from several Class 7 beasts, yet it had shattered under a single strike from Jian Chen. He was filled with disbelief. Impossible. The Turtle Clan has strong defense but weak attack. The ruler is clearly only at the peak of the 14th star, so why is he so strong? The person could not help but be astounded. But at this very moment, a blur flashed in front of him. Jian Chen had arrived and stabbed out with his king armament that radiated with dark light and an aura of destruction. "You asked for it, ruler of the Turtle Clan." Determination surged on the person's face. With a swing of his hand, he tossed the condensed energy. Jian Chen adapted his form. The king armament changed directions and stabbed toward the ball of energy instead. Boom! The Saint King's power was dispersed by Jian Chen's attack, leading to an eruption of violent energy that struck Jian Chen heavily. Jian Chen flew backward uncontrollably, now slightly injured. However, it was nothing that could affect him. His gaze became icy. This was something he would only show when killing intent surged in his heart. Leaping heavily from the ground, he used the illusory flash to continue his charge at the old man. This time, the old man no longer had any power to resist Jian Chen. All he could do was watch as Jian Chen drew near. SHWT. The center of the old man's eyebrows was pierced, allowing the sword to impale his head and wipe out his soul. Jian Chen smoothly removed the old man's space ring from his hand and checked through it. Only then did he relax slightly after confirmed that the crystal was inside. Jian Chen had already made up his mind about the crystal when he first caught a glance of it. Suddenly, Jian Chen's face sank. He could feel several presences locking tightly onto him. Over 10 people had already surrounded him, each staring at him viciously. Jian Chen's arm jolted and the king armament immediately began to radiate with a dark light. Its devastating aura filled the entire room, directly pressuring the people around him. It was extremely overbearing. "If you still want the crystal, come at me." Jian Chen pointed his sword at the sky as he spoke with a frigid voice. He flowed with a condescending aura, as if the people around him were nothing. "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, we don't want to become your enemies, but it's such a large piece of crystal. It's a little unreasonable if you take all of it. Why don't you take it out and split it up among everyone? After all, we all found it with you," a black-robed old man said with a deep voice. He was very fearful of Jian Chen, but the enticement of the divine quality crystal was just too great. Also, there were so many people present, so he believed that if they all worked together, the ruler of the Turtle Clan would not be able to fight them all no matter how powerful he was. Jian Chen raised the space ring high up in the air with his left hand and said, "The crystal is right here. If you want it, come take it." "Ruler, you are indeed very strong. That is an irrefutable truth, but are you confident enough to take on my Tian-level saint technique?" said a young man arrogantly. He was one of the people who possessed a Tian-level saint technique. Wind began to whistle as soon as the young man finished what he had to say. Jian Chen then appeared before him with lightning speed, stabbing out at the center of his eyebrows without any hesitation. The young man was astounded. He had never expected that Jian Chen would take the initiative to attack. Saint King's power immediately surged out in an attempt to block Jian Chen's sudden attack. However, Jian Chen's sword was countless times faster than before. The sword seemed to overcome the laws of space and surpass the restriction of time, stabbing out with an unbelievable speed as a streak of light. SHWT. The young man did not have the time to condense his armor at all. The king armament had stabbed through his head with dumbfounding speed, wiping out his soul. What a fast strike! Cries rang out from the surroundings. Everyone's expressions changed. They were all stunned by the speed that Jian Chen had displayed. It was just too fast. They would end up in a similar circumstance if they had been caught off guard and faced the sword instead. And this was how a peak saint ruler who knew a Tian-level saint technique passed away. Everyone's gazes toward Jian Chen experienced a change while their fear for him skyrocketed. He was definitely a terrifying opponent. Jian Chen slowly drew his king armament from the head and said coldly, "So what if you know a Tian-level saint technique? Before me, you don't even have the chance to use it." The hall fell into a silence. Everyone stared at Jian Chen without saying anything at all. Thisnik stared at Jian Chen from afar as his gaze flickered. A sharp sliver of killing intent was hidden in the depths of his eyes, and he thought, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, you are indeed very strong, but you will still die by my hand in the end." Jian Chen slowly glanced past everyone with a sharp glare. "Since no one wants to fight for it anymore, this piece of crystal is now mine." Jian Chen put the space ring away before continuing his search around the hall. The nervous atmosphere in the hall was immediately dispelled by Jian Chen's actions. Everyone gave up on the idea of fighting Jian Chen for the crystal, continuing their search for other treasures in the hall. The blood drained very quickly from the two experts that had died in Jian Chen's hands, sucked away by the ground without leaving a single mark. Although everyone saw this happen, no one could find any reason. As they could not think of why, even after deep thought, they tossed the matter aside and no longer paid attention to the weird phenomenon. Afterward, the people searched through the first floor of the palace for half a day. They took away many precious treasures, virtually emptying the first floor of everything it had. Only when they got everything did they move on to the first floor. The second floor also possessed many extremely valuable and rare items, which were quickly all taken away by the people. At this very moment, a loud rumble rang out from afar, combined with the rippling of a powerful energy. The commotion attracted the attention of many people, causing them all to go up and investigate in curiosity. In the end, they arrived before a huge stone door, and above the door was a single powerfully written word, "Treasury." "This must be where a large number of treasures are stored," someone cried out. He was filled with excitement. "There's no mechanism to open the stone door. Looks like our only way in is by smashing it." "Let's break it together," someone suggested. Immediately, several experts began to attack the door together. Within the booms, several ninth heavenly layer saint rulers struck the door together. However, it remained unharmed, without even a crack. "The door has been tempered by the energy of the palace and has become extraordinarily tough. There's only the possibility of breaking through if we all strike together." What's everyone hesitating for? Everything inside must be treasures. There might even be divine quality crystals. Let's all open the door together. Several people used enticing words to motivate the entire group. They had all come here for the treasures of the Octaterra Divine Hall, so they reached an agreement very quickly. They all struck out at the door, including even Jian Chen and newbies. With a deafening sound, the combined attacks from several dozen experts struck the door. However, it remained without a scratch. "Let's use our Tian-level saint techniques," someone immediately yelled out, before beginning to charge up his saint technique. Seeing how someone had already begun to charge up their Tian-level saint technique, the others all began to hesitate, but a few joined him very quickly. They began to cast their saint techniques together. The Tian-level saint techniques charged up very quickly, and they all struck out at the same time, colliding with the door with lightning speed. At the same time, the other experts did not stand around either. They struck out with their most powerful blows, cooperating with the Tian-level saint techniques to break the stone door. Boom! An even more powerful sound rang out as the powerful force swept in all directions. It knocked everyone backward. The stone door trembled violently as clouds of dust fell from it. A tiny crack had appeared on its surface. "Let's continue our attacks. We can break the door if we do it a few more times," someone said loudly. Afterward, everyone struck the door together once again, while the number of people who had used Tian-level saint techniques increased to 18. Everyone used all they had to break down the stone door to obtain the treasure inside. Chapter 923. the Blood Demon Emperor over 59th Heavenly Layer Saint Rulers struck the stone door with their full power once again. This time, several had used Tian-level Saint techniques, which lead to the immediate descent of a terrifying pressure which filled up the entire space. Boom! The attacks and Saint techniques forcefully struck the stone door at virtually the same time. Violent energy ripples erupted, knocking everyone back once again. No one could retain their footing when facing such violent gusts of energy. A while later, a meter-long crack could be seen on the tough stone door after the gusts of energy had slowly dispersed in the hall. The door is too tough. If we continue like this, it'll take at least a few days before we break through it, said someone as they sighed grimly. The treasures inside must be invaluable if there's such a tough door obstructing entry. Let's do it a few times. We'll be able to break through it. Someone immediately began to encourage the others as he did not want to give up. Let's rest for a while first before continuing. Afterward, all of them began to meditate in the surroundings to recover their energy. The people who cast the Tian-level Saint techniques needed to do this in particular, as they had exerted greatly every time they cast the technique. Additionally, since they were faced with a situation where they needed to be on guard against any sudden attacks, they did not dare to cast it consecutively. They needed some time to retain their combat ability. Afterward, everyone continued their attacks at the door. Almost all of them used their most powerful attacks, fully utilizing their abilities to strike the door with Tian-level Saint techniques. Meanwhile, the people who cast the Saint techniques increased beyond 20. All those who could use it were participating now. The stone door constantly weakened each time it was struck by the wild flurry of attacks. It finally disintegrated after several days, revealing a long passageway. Jian Chen, newbies, and Xie Wang entered the treasury cautiously with the group. Mog and the three others followed behind. All of them maintained a certain level of vigilance. The space ahead opened up after they passed through the long passageway. They arrived in an extremely large space, which seemed very much like a storage room. Large piles of items were stacked messily inside. As everyone slowly glanced past the items, they revealed deep joy and greed in their eyes. In the very center was a mountainous pile of crystal coins. They shone with a dazzling light and were of a great quality. They were innumerable. Among the pile of crystal coins were some fist-sized divine quality crystals that radiated with a powerful and pure water attribute energy. The surroundings were chock full of metal shelves forged from essence metal, and tables made from spiritual wood. A total of over a dozen weapons of various sizes laid on the shelves, while each and every one of them shone brightly and radiated with powerful ripples of energies. Meanwhile, the wooden tables were covered with various books, small sealed wooden boxes, and pieces of divine quality crystal. The crystals could be as small as fists or as large as heads. They all glistened charmingly and there were lots of them. All of them, without any exceptions, focused their gazes on the large pile of coins and crystals. Their eyes were filled with greed. Perhaps they did not view the coins too importantly, but none of them could resist the temptation of the crystals. Jian Chen glanced past everything. The wealth stored in here also caused his heart to beat with excitement, but his gaze was not stuck to the crystals. Instead, he stared fixedly at the various weapons on the shelves. His eyes were filled with unconcealable joy. Ruler armaments. There's actually so many ruler armaments. Jian Chen screamed in his heart. To him, ruler armaments were worth much more than the divine quality crystals. If he brought them back to the Tian Yuan continent and gave the weapons to the flame mercenaries, their strength would increase abruptly. Whoosh! With a sound of wind, countless people charged toward the crystals and boxes on the wooden tables uncontrollably. No one actually paid any attention to the ruler armaments. Ruler armaments were an irrefutable treasure on the Tian Yuan continent, but to the sea race, they were worth far less than divine quality crystals, despite still retaining some value. As a result, all the people of the sea race focused their attention on the crystals while no one paid any mind to the ruler armaments, or even the king armaments. Jian Chen, newbies, Xie Wang, and the four others did not show any hesitations either, all charging at the huge piles of treasures as they fought over them in a flurry. However, Jian Chen did not go for the crystals and the unknown treasures and instead went for the metal racks. He quickly stored away all the ruler armaments, before participating in the fight for the crystals. Under the rapid collection of several dozen people, all the crystals and treasures were finally cleared out. All that was left was the mountainous pile of crystal coins. All of them revealed unconcealable joy and excitement, as they all had benefited greatly. Jian Chen's harvest was extremely great as well. Not only had he obtained ruler armaments, He had also grabbed several dozen crystals along with the wooden boxes that stored things he did not know of. With so many divine quality crystals and high-class monster cores, my chaotic body should be able to break through to the third layer very quickly, Jian Chen thought. At the same time, he made up his mind. He would go into seclusion as soon as he got out. He planned to pour all his efforts into breaking through to the third layer. He was the epicenter of a storm of blood within the sea realm all those years ago, ending the lives of countless 14th-star Sea Soul experts and even several 15th and 16th-star Sea Soul warriors. He was named as the Demon King of Slaughter. In that age, there were people who wondered if he would even attack ordinary people if it were not for the worry of celestial decay. This was because slaughter was what he cultivated. Only by constantly committing slaughter could he become more powerful. However, in the end, the three halls could no longer endure his actions. All three hall masters moved out together, embroiling in a grand battle in outer space with him. In the end, he fell to the hands of the three hall masters. However, the three halls had also paid a heavy price because of this. The hall masters of the Sea Goddess Hall and the Serpent God Hall were heavily injured, while the hall master of the Heaven Spirit Hall had been slain by him. The position of hall master in the Heaven Spirit Hall ended up remaining empty for 1,000 years because of that. It shocked the entire sea realm. As Thisnik narrated the Blood Demon Emperor's legacy, all the people present were astonished to the point that they become speechless. No one dared to touch the book anymore, but they all stared fixedly at it as their hearts beat heavily. This was the cultivation method of the Blood Demon Emperor. If someone obtained it, they would be able to cultivate the Blood Demon Emperor's supreme method. Just how enticing was this? However, it was a pity that the residual chi of slaughter was left behind by the Blood Demon Emperor, so no one dared to take the risk and touch it. It would be extremely difficult to recover once their souls were damaged, and it was highly likely that it would leave behind eternal consequences, preventing people from breaking through for the rest of their lives. Everyone fell into a deathly silence. They all stared at the book left behind by the Blood Demon Emperor as their hearts were filled with pity. It was so tempting before them, yet they did not have the power to obtain it. Everyone became filled with regret, but they could do nothing. The mist contained a great killing intent, as if it was about to forcefully shake his sea of consciousness into pieces. What powerful killing intent! The artifact spirit's voice rang out in Jian Chen's head. The golden tower floating in his sea of consciousness suddenly became several thousand meters tall, radiating with a bright, golden light to protect Jian Chen's soul. At the same time, the sword spirits that were absorbing the multicolored stone moved as well. Purple and azure lights filled up his entire sea of consciousness as two swords appeared indistinctly, chopping at the bloody mist. As the two swords chopped down, an indescribable aura suddenly appeared. It was the traces of the omnipresent, the laws of the world. The surrounding space trembled violently and fell into chaos. Suddenly, a vast sea of stars appeared. The starry sky was filled with battle cries as countless immortals warred in this unknown region of space. Every strike from them possessed the power to destroy worlds, turning countless planets in the surroundings to dust. Following it, two humongous swords, one purple and one azure, flew out from the void. They charged at the group of immortals with devastating auras, immediately causing the space to become scattered with flesh and blood. Countless powerful immortals were felled by the swords and their golden blood filled up the void. Every drop of blood contained terrifyingly great power, enough to kill off Saint Kings, while the corpses of immortals littered the entire space. The Saint artifact began to tremble violently. The artifact spirit hiding within witnessed this clearly, now filled with terror. The bloody mist in Jian Chen's sea of consciousness seemed to be terrified as well, violently shrinking before retreating with speed even greater than it had come in with. It returned into the book and disappeared. Fortunately, this chi of slaughter possessed a certain level of intelligence, or we really wouldn't have been able to do anything. Master, it's best if you don't touch these objects in the future. It's very dangerous, the sword spirits' voices rang out in Jian Chen's head. Just earlier, the sword spirits did not use absolute strength to repel the chi of slaughter but had instead displayed an image through its abilities. It formed a great deterrence, driving away the chi. This could not be used on people and was only effective against spiritual bodies such as the artifact spirit and the intelligent chi of slaughter. This was because the azulate swords themselves were extremely high-level spirits. Even though they were weak now, they had a natural ability to suppress similar existences. The chi of slaughter disappeared back into the book. It had been frightened away and it was now hiding. It had developed a fear for Jian Chen. This time, Jian Chen was no longer faced with any obstructions, allowing him to examine the book normally. His expression was mixed with doubt and surprise. Since no one has any interest in the cultivation method, I'll take it. Jian Chen picked up the book once again. He put it away in his space ring as if nothing had happened, completely unaffected by the Qi of Slaughter. The Qi of Slaughter had already been frightened by the sword spirits in Jian Chen's Sea of Consciousness, so it no longer dared to attack Jian Chen again. Everyone cleared out the objects in the treasury, before continuing to the next floor of the hall. As soon as they stepped on the third floor, they were hit in the face by a towering sword Qi, which caused everyone to experience a prickling pain. Even the air seemed to be contaminated by this sword Qi, becoming sharp. In the center of the hall stood a huge, 30-meter-tall sword. It stood inside a dry well as it radiated with a vast pressure. There was also a vaguely condescending aura, as if the sword was the supreme ruler of the world. The sword was a straight sword that had been magnified dozens of times. Although the sword was 60 centimeters wide, it would only have a width of 2 fingers if it was a regular size. This is an emperor armament. Jian Chen's eyes shone with a resplendent light. His heart began to beat uncontrollably. He had never seen an emperor armament, but he had already determined what it was the moment he caught a glance of the huge sword. At the same time, one of the 49 inscriptions that formed the hexagram binding the emperor armament broke apart. I will be taking the emperor armament. I'll kill whoever gets in the way. Jian Chen's eyes also flashed with a cold light. He immediately drew his king armament from his space ring before charging at 5 people who stood together. Newbies naturally did not fall behind after Jian Chen had moved as he had been tempted long ago. His hands immediately became golden as he charged off in excitement. Jian Chen's sword turned into closely packed blurs, enveloping the 5 people. Even though the 5 of them fought as if their lives depended on it, they were still not Jian Chen's opponents. They came in contact with the king armament a few times and soon became heavily injured as they constantly backpedaled in retreat. However, before they could even stabilize themselves, the center of their eyebrows was impaled by a stroke, wiping out their souls. Jian Chen removed their space rings along the way before charging at someone else. Newbie's eyes burned with battle intent as he battled 2 people with his bare fists. His hands were laced with potent poison, while golden threads would shoot out from time to time. He heavily injured the 2 of them in the blink of an eye, before wiping out their souls by stabbing them through their foreheads with his threads. In the blink of an eye, close to 10 people had died in the hall. Their blood would disappear into the ground following their deaths, while an inscription in the hexagram would break too. The hall plunged into a chaotic battle, while the silent agreement of peace between them had already been broken. They all began to fight for different purposes, plenty because of vengeance and the hostility between clans. They all used this situation to resolve their animosity. Besides this, there was also a few people who fought to steal the treasures of others. The hall fell into chaos. People who still possessed some Saint King's power condensed their armors, while those who had run out formed barriers from their own powers, blocking a portion of the attacks. Chapter 926. The seal undone. A vast pressure suddenly appeared. Someone had begun to charge up their Tian-level Saint technique, while his 3 opponents were kept busy by his companions. This created precious time for his Saint technique. The Saint technique completed its initial charge up very quickly and rapidly locked onto the 3 people. Afterward, it directly turned the 3 people into dust as it was released with a devastating pressure, causing blood to rain. Deaths rapidly increased in the intense slaughter. Tian-level Saint techniques were cast again and again, quickly leading to the deaths of over 30 experts, together with the dispersion of their souls. There were even more people injured. The ruler of the Turtle Clan and Thisnik are too powerful. They're the hardest to deal with. Let's all work together to attack them. We need to eliminate them, immediately. Many people directed their focus to Jian Chen and Thisnik. You're right. We need to eliminate them first or the Octaterra Emperor's legacy will end up with one of them. For the legacy, we will eliminate the ruler of the Turtle Clan and eliminate Thisnik. More and more people began to chant. No one was stupid. They knew that if they wanted to obtain the legacy successfully, they needed to eliminate these 2 strongest opponents. Immediately, over 40 experts charged toward Jian Chen and Thisnik as killing intent flowed from them. For others stayed away from the fight and charged up their Saint techniques, also targeting Jian Chen and Thisnik. You're all looking to die. Emoji, you forego deal with those people casting Tian-level saint techniques. Keep them busy. Newbie's called out as killing intent swelled in his eyes. He spat out a mouthful of venomous gas, enveloping around a radius of 100 meters around Jian Chen. The gas was extremely corrosive, affecting everyone in the region. They all needed to devote a portion of their strength to resist the gas, so it affected the total amount of power they could use. On the other hand, Jian Chen possessed the 10,000 immunity, which was especially effective against the venom of silver-striped golden snakes. As a result, he was fine and completely unaffected despite being in the center of the region. MOG and the three others did not interfere. They were in a rather poor condition from battles earlier, so they currently gathered in a place afar as they watched everything unfold. They did not listen to newbies and go deal with the four people casting saint techniques. Jian Chen's eyes became icy as the dark light from the king armament illuminated the surroundings. With a devastating power, he finished off the three people right before him, then he turned into a blur and charged into the group. He used the illusory flash to quickly make way toward the location where the saint techniques were charging up. At the same time, Thisnik also rushed out from his encirclement, quickly shooting toward two of the four people. Tian-level saint techniques were a great threat, whether it was Jian Chen or Thisnik. They needed to prevent it as soon as possible. Two people targeted Jian Chen, while the other two targeted Thisnik. This was why the division of labor between Jian Chen and Thisnik was extremely clear-cut. They only needed to eliminate the people threatening them. The expressions of the four people changed slightly when they saw Jian Chen and Thisnik rushing at them. Saint King's power immediately surged from their bodies and condensed into a suit of armor as they shot back. They wanted to increase their distance from Jian Chen and Thisnik. You sure are sick of living if you dare to cast saint techniques at me. Thisnik had already approached his two targets as the two blades in his hands transformed into streaks of magnificent light that chopped toward the two people. At the same time, Jian Chen had also approached his targets. His king armament turned into streaks of black light as he stabbed at the foreheads of the two people. Thisnik's blades landed on both people. One of them was knocked backward and his saint technique was forcefully disrupted, while the other person was chopped in half. However, he did not bleed and his severed body quickly turned into stone. It's actually the stone puppet technique of the Rock Python clan, growled Thisnik. He looked forward and saw that the person he had supposedly cut in half appear in perfect shape over 1,000 meters away. The person did not stop the casting of his Tian-level saint technique either, reaching the end of the process. A vast pressure immediately descended from the sky, locking tightly onto Thisnik. On the other side, Jian Chen's king armament stabbed toward the foreheads of the other two people. His attacks were akin to those from a third heavenly layer Saint King, so they directly shattered the condensed armors. Without even giving them the time to react, he stabbed out two more times with lightning speed, piercing their foreheads and wiping out their souls. Jian Chen took their space rings from their fingers and put them away without even looking at the contents. He then looked toward the hexagram for the Emperor armament, and found that 40 of the 49 inscriptions were now gone. All he needed to do was to kill another 9 people and the seal would be released. Jian Chen did not hurry off to do just that and instead turned to Thisnik. Now that the saint technique had been completely charged up, he wanted to see just how Thisnik was going to endure it. Jian Chen had witnessed exactly how powerful a Tian-level saint technique was from a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler long ago. It was powerful enough to even heavily injure a 2nd heavenly layer saint king or even kill them off. Even if Thisnik survives this time, he'll be heavily injured. One more of the remaining 9 inscriptions disappeared from the hexagram. There was only 8 remaining now. A vicious sliver of light flashed across Thisnik's eyes. He paid no heed to the corpse's space ring and slowly turned to the group afar. His face was filled with great levels of killing intent as he called out, "Since you want to kill me, I will definitely not let you go." Thisnik turned into a flash, charging toward the group with lightning speed. He actually planned to take on so many people all by himself. However, he had the protection from the power of a 9th heavenly layer Saint King. Attacks from ordinary experts could do nothing to him. In the blink of an eye, another 8 people died in Thisnik's hands. All 8 inscriptions in the hexagram disappeared as well. Rumble! Suddenly, an extremely tremendous sword chi appeared. It bodily filled up the entire region, even causing the entire palace to shake. This sudden change disrupted Thisnik's slaughter. In that moment, everyone looked toward the origin of the sound. They all saw the Emperor armament slowly rising from the well, levitating in mid-air as it radiated with a condescending aura as if it was the supreme ruler. The seal on the Emperor armament has been released. Go take the weapon quickly, everyone called out in excitement. Ignoring any battles, they all moved as fast as they could toward the Emperor armament. Their eyes were feverish from the temptation. They knew too little about Emperor armaments and believed that they could be obtained in the same way as ruler armaments. They thought that it would belong to whoever's hands it fell into. Chapter 927. Battle for the Emperor armament. Even though many of them had become rash due to the Emperor armament, there was still a few people who did not participate in the rush and instead watched from afar. Jian Chen, newbies, and Xia Wang were some of these people. Meanwhile, Mog and the other three were of the former, having charged over long ago. Newbies stared coldly at Mog's group as they ran toward the Emperor armament. He gently said, "The four of them are nothing good. We better stay vigilant." Jian Chen nodded slightly but said nothing. At this very moment something happened. The Emperor armament suddenly began to glow with a blinding light, and actually began attacking despite having no one controlling it. It shot toward the people as a streak of light with unbelievable speed. 3 saint rulers failed to react, which allowed the Emperor armament to rush through them. They were split in half down the nose and their souls were destroyed before they could even howl in agony. The Emperor armament continued onward without any decrease in force. It headed toward the walls of the hall, before colliding heavily against it. Boom! With a deafening noise, the entire hall began to tremble violently, while everyone inside almost fell over due to the loss of balance. They all finally calmed down from their rashness, staring at the Emperor armament in shock and disbelief. None of them had thought that this weapon without a user would actually fly by itself and would actually possess such terrifying power. It could make the entire hall shake from just a collision. Boom! 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 The Emperor armament constantly slammed against the wall of the hall, causing the entire place to tremble and rumble constantly. However, it was unable to create any damage. It still possessed a great force, but it was still far from a Saint Emperor's power after all. It could shake the hall but not destroy it. It wants to escape, Jian Chen muttered as he stared fixedly at the Emperor armament's actions. Perhaps the weapon has intelligence? Newbies asked in curiosity. He was filled with disbelief. I don't know, but I have heard of some rumors regarding ruler armaments. As long as experts who have reached the 9th heavenly layer as saint rulers pass away from age, they will leave behind their saint weapon. It will contain a shred of their 3 vital energies. They hope to be revived someday in the future, Jian Chen said gruffly. Newbie's eyes narrowed. Jian Chen, are you saying that the reason why the Emperor armament possesses intelligence is because the Saint Emperor soul inside is acting up? The Saint Emperor is not dead? Jian Chen shook his head. He crossed his hands behind him as he stared unblinkingly at the Emperor armament. I'm not sure, but the power of the Emperor armament is already beyond anything I can control, unless my strength increases. Jian Chen's expression suddenly changed when he reached there. The Emperor armament was currently shooting toward where they stood with a sharp and powerful sword Qi. Be careful, dodge it, Jian Chen cried out. He had already become a blur, moving into the distance. Meanwhile, newbies and Xia Wang did not tarry behind either. They had always paid attention to the Emperor armament and they dodged to both sides at the same time. Boom! The Emperor armament smashed heavily into where they stood before, and its wild energy sent all 3 of them into the air. Arg! My arm! Xia Wang howled out in pain. The Emperor armament had shot over too quickly, and his dodge had been a little slow. His entire left arm had been severed and blood sprayed like a fountain from his severed limb. The Emperor armament did not continue its attacks at the 3 of them. It immediately shot into the sky again, colliding heavily with the high roof of the hall, before turning around and shooting at the ground again. This time, it targeted the experts that stood scattered in the surroundings. Run! Each and every person paled in fright, using their various fleeing techniques in an attempt to escape from the weapon's attack range. However, the Emperor armament was just too big, so it possessed an even greater range for attack. Another expert failed to dodge in time and died to the weapon. The Emperor armament was like a headless fly, rampaging within the hall. It wanted to break through the hall and leave, so it behaved extremely rashly. However, all the people in the hall suffered from its aimless attacks and were left in horrible conditions as they dodged. Very soon, Several more people died to its blade, while more than 10 people had been injured by it too. Thisnik stared fixedly at the Emperor armament with a stern expression. Surging Saint King's power rushed out from within him once again, forming a suit of armor to cover every inch of his body. Only his eyes remained uncovered. His arms were covered particularly well. The armor was even thicker there. Thisnik leaped up and arrived near the hilt of the Emperor armament. He directly opened his arms, hugging the thick hilt tightly in an attempt to subdue the Emperor armament. The Emperor armament suddenly went quiet, before a powerful sword chi exploded from within it. The sword chi turned into a dazzling white light that enveloped Thisnik. Only a series of scratching sounds could be heard as it immediately covered Thisnik's armor with slashes all over. The defense of the armor was constantly eaten away. Thisnik was unwilling to accept this. With a violent roar, the Saint King's power poured out from his body unceasingly, making up for any consumption of the armor's energy. A space ring appeared in his hand. He wanted to force the Emperor armament into it. The Emperor armament immediately began to resist, refusing to enter the space ring. No matter how Thisnik tried, the Emperor armament could not be stored into the space ring. Unable to break free from Thisnik's grasp, the Emperor armament rampaged in the hall as it dragged Thisnik along. It constantly rammed against the surroundings and tremendous force jolted through Thisnik. The agony tortured him greatly. If it were not for the armor, his organs would have probably turned to dust long ago. However, even though that was the case, it did not make the process any better for Thisnik. Many experts also suffered grievous wounds. Many people fled in all directions, forced into a horrible condition by the Emperor armament. The casualties were heavy, with less than 20 people alive now. Moreover, at least half of them were injured. The consumption of Thisnik's Saint King's power was extremely severe, to the point that he could not last much longer. He released his grasp of the hilt regretfully. However, the weapon did not stop because of that. It continued to rampage in the hall, constantly slamming against the surroundings and producing deafening booms. It caused the entire hall to shake with no signs of stopping. My God, this Emperor armament has gone crazy. Newbies arrived before Jian Chen and swore as he breathed heavily while staring at the rampaging Emperor armament. The weapon had left a bone-deep wound on his back. Jian Chen stood silently as he carefully observed the Emperor armament. He opened his hand and a golden streak of light immediately shot out from the center of his forehead, falling into his palm as a tiny golden tower. All he could do now was use the Saint artifact to subdue the Emperor armament. The sword spirits did not have the power right to confront it now. If the Emperor armament had a spirit, it naturally could be overwhelmed by the sword spirits. However, Jian Chen knew very well that this was impossible. There was an extremely high possibility that it had the soul of a Saint Emperor. At this moment, the Emperor armament turned around and shot toward Jian Chen once again. Newbies produced a weird cry. He was unwilling to hesitate at all and dodged immediately. However, Jian Chen did not choose to dodge this time. Instead, he stood there like nothing was happening, waiting for the arrival of the Emperor armament. When the Emperor armament was 10 meters away from Jian Chen, a white light suddenly appeared. Jian Chen had already notified the artifact spirit to open the main entrance of the Saint artifact. As soon as the Emperor armament struck the white light, it disappeared. It had been sucked away into the artifact space. Newbies, guard the Saint artifact well. Jian Chen sent a mental message to newbies before he entered the space as well. Within the artifact space, the long-prepared artifact spirit battled the Emperor armament mid-air. The artifact spirit was the absolute ruler of the artifact space, a legitimate Saint Emperor. Although the Emperor armament was very powerful, it was still a weapon in the end. As such, how could it face up against the artifact spirit? It was subdued by the artifact spirit with much effort. Currently, it was pinned down by a giant hand materialized by the artifact spirit, and was unable to break free no matter how it struggled. In the blink of an eye, the domineering Emperor armament had unknowingly entered the artifact space, falling into the hands of the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit suppressed the Emperor armament with the artifact's power and stopped it from struggling. Afterward, he arrived before Jian Chen and said courteously, "Master, this one has suppressed the Emperor armament. However, the Emperor armament is very powerful, so it is unlikely that Master can control it with Master's current strength." Jian Chen did not mind at all. He was filled with excitement as he said, "No worries. I'll be able to use it very quickly. Once I break through to the third layer of the chaotic body, I'll have the power to use it. I just wonder how great my battle ability will become when combined with the Emperor armament after I reach the third layer. Jian Chen was filled with anticipation. At the same time, he secretly swore that he would make the chaotic body breakthrough as fast as possible once he left the Octaterra Divine Hall. Artifact Spirit, I'll keep the Emperor armament here and leave it in your care. I will be leaving first. Jian Chen was not willing to stay in the artifact space for very long as the dangers outside were still present. As a result, he left very soon. When he left the Saint Artifact, all he saw was the experts who were fortunate enough to survive encircling newbies and Jian Chen under Thisnika's lead. They were all hostile. Jian Chen had expected this, so he was not surprised at all when he saw this scene. He first took the Saint Artifact from newbie's hands calmly, then looked towards Xie Wang. He said, "Xie Wang, don't resist. I'm taking you into the artifact space. Your missing limb can be healed there." Immediately, a milky white light rushed out from the Saint Artifact and enveloped Xie Wang. Xie Wang did not resist and was immediately taken away by the artifact's powers. The Saint Artifact then became a streak of golden light, disappearing into Jian Chen's forehead. All the others, including Thisnik, became stunned when they saw this. They stared at Jian Chen's forehead in interest as their faces became filled with disbelief. They had never seen or imagined that items could be stored in someone's head. It was such a big tower as well. They all could not help but grow curious when they saw this. They wondered how such a big, golden tower could burrow into someone's forehead. What they saw had completely overthrown their prior knowledge. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, what's that little golden tower? It's so miraculous. Thisnik stared fixedly at Jian Chen as he asked curiously. A sliver of greed hid in the depths of his eyes. "Thisnik, I wonder what you all intend to do?" Jian Chen glared at all of them. He did not reply to Thisnika's question and instead rebuked coldly. Thisnik was slightly angered when he heard this. He growled, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, I really want to ask you some questions. Not only did you take away the huge, invaluable divine quality crystal on the first floor, you even obtained the Blood Demon Emperor's cultivation method on the second floor. You reaped far greater benefits than all of us, and now on the third floor, you've actually shamelessly taken away the Emperor armament. Haven't you gone overboard?" Thisnika's tone could not help but become hostile toward the end. For the Emperor armament, he had paid a huge price. The amount of Saint King's power wasted pained his heart. It was not the power of an ordinary Saint King but power from an expert on par with Hall Elders. It was extremely precious. However, not only had he failed to obtain the Emperor armament after paying such a great price, it had even ended up in Jian Chen's hands. How was it possible for him to not be angry? Jian Chen's face darkened as he immediately glared at Thisnik. He said coldly, "Thisnik, please speak carefully. You do not possess the ability to subdue the Emperor armament, so you can blame yourself for being too weak. You can't lay the blame on others. Are you saying that no one else can take if you can't have it?" Thisnika's face darkened as he stared back at Jian Chen without fear. He gnashed his teeth. "All right, it was me who didn't have the power to subdue the Emperor armament. However, ruler of the Turtle Clan, let me give you some advice. I hope you don't regret this in the future. It's impossible to enjoy some treasure so easily." Jian Chen's lips curled into a scornful smile. "I never regret my actions. But Thisnik, I need to warn you as well. It's best if you don't threaten me, or do you believe that you'll become like those corpses as well, never to be able to leave the hall?" Jian Chen's voice was filled with powerful killing intent. He had already made up his mind to end Thisnika's life. Thisnika's eyes narrowed as he snorted coldly. He said nothing in response and instead turned around and left. He made his way toward the fourth floor, while his eyes were now filled with frigidness. "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, let's see how everything plays out. You still don't know who's going to end up as the corpse." With Thisnika's departure, the other people all left as well. They all maintained a certain distance between each other as they made their way toward the fourth floor. Only Mog and two other people were left in the end. One of them had been slain by the Emperor armament. "Ruler, Thisnik is not a simple person. You need to be careful," Mog said purposefully with a tone of concern. He acted like he was worried about Jian Chen. Jian Chen only nodded his head in response to Mog's act of concern. He did not say anything more. Calling newbies, He too continued on his way to the 4th floor. Mog and the two others looked at each other. They could naturally feel that Jian Chen's treatment of them had undergone some minute changes. The three of them hesitated slightly, before following Jian Chen quietly to the 4th floor. Humph, that Thisnik sure is arrogant. If it weren't for the fact that there are fewer and fewer people now and we still might need them for any future barriers, the great newbies, would have finished them off long ago, said Newbies as he gnashed along the way. That Thisnik is not a simple person. I feel like he's still hiding some powerful trump cards. It's best if we are careful, warned Jian Chen. Chapter 928. 8th floor of the hall. Jian Chen and Newbies continued to the 4th floor of the palace, while Mog and the other two followed closely behind them. They could sense that Jian Chen and Newbies now treated them differently. Mog's group constantly attempted to explain what had happened before. They arrived on the 4th floor very quickly but discovered that it was actually empty. Meanwhile, Thisnika's group was nowhere to be seen. There's nothing here. Let's continue to the 5th floor, Jian Chen said calmly after glancing around. They then continued their way to the 5th floor and did not meet any obstructions along the way. There were no formations or barriers at all. The hall had a total of 9 floors, yet the 5th one way empty. Jian Chen's group continued onward carefully, passing through the 6th and 7th floors and arriving on the 8th smoothly. The 8th floor seemed empty as well. However, some regions of space here actually seemed hazy, signs of formations being triggered. Through the hazy space, they could vaguely see some trapped people. All of them were trapped within the formation space, including Thisnik. 30 meters in front, there was even the corpse of a person that died to the formations. His blood had run dry as well, sucked away by the hall. Be careful, there are formations here. Jian Chen's group could not help but slow down when they saw this. They stared grimly ahead. The formations are very powerful, much more powerful than the ones we came across before. It's best that we don't separate from one another, since we might not be able to break through it by ourselves. We can work together, Jian Chen said gruffly, before advancing forward cautiously. The formations in the hall were extremely profound. Although they had weakened greatly with the corrosion of time, a few high-leveled ones still possessed great power. There was only one way from the 8th floor to the 9th, and that was to pass through the countless barriers. There was no other way. Even flying would not work. Formations were hidden everywhere on the 8th floor and could catch people off guard. After taking 10 steps, Jian Chen's group suddenly became ensnared in one. At the same time, violent booms resounded. 100 meters ahead, Thisnik and the others had broken through the one that had trapped them, resulting in their appearance. As soon as Thisnik escaped, he noticed that Jian Chen's group had also become ensnared. A cold sliver of killing intent immediately flashed across his eyes as he thought, "Ruler of the Turtle Clan, I'll let these formations chip away at some of your strength. I will definitely not be letting you leave this place alive. The cultivation method of the Blood Demon Emperor, the Emperor armament from a human emperor and that golden tower hidden in your head will all become mine. No one has the right to fight over things with me. The day of your death will arrive once I get the legacy of the Octaterra Emperor." Thisnik continued onward with the others that he had reached a tacit understanding with, falling into another formation very quickly. Although Thisnik had once been everyone's enemy, there were no eternal foes in the world, only eternal benefits. Under such circumstances, he decided to work together with the others once again, just to reach the 9th floor. There were only less than 20 people left of the 160 that had entered initially, and many of them were wounded as well. There were 3 groups in total who made their way through the 8th floor. Another one besides Jian Chen and Thisnika's groups. They too had fallen into a formation, strenuously trying to break through it. As they advanced, the formations became more and more powerful. All 3 groups used everything they had to break through the formations because they all believed that the Octaterra Emperor's legacy would be on the 9th floor, and that whoever got there first would be able to obtain it. As a result, all 3 groups devoted every moment of their time to break through the formations. They feared that they would be overtaken by the other 2 groups. 2 whole days passed. Although Jian Chen's group had relatively fewer people and came at a later time, they possessed Jian Chen and Newbies, 2 people who could stand on equal ground with Saint Kings. As a result, they were slightly faster than the other 2 groups, now completely caught up. Right now, the 3 groups had all arrived at the center of the 8th floor. They were still halfway from the 9th floor. The other two groups secretly panicked when they saw Jian Chen's group catch up to the first group. They immediately sped up, both wanting to be first. The formations constantly became stronger toward the end, causing everyone to move slower and slower. At the very beginning, they only needed a single attack together, but now they all needed to put in a tremendous effort and use everything they had. Boom! Another powerful formation was broken through, revealing Jian Chen's group. Jian Chen had his king armament in hand. It shone brightly with a dark light, while a thick layer of chaotic force coiled around it, radiating with a devastating aura. Behind Jian Chen was newbies, MOG, and the two others. They all seemed exhausted and greatly drained after breaking through so many formations. The formations are constantly becoming stronger. Do you still think we'll be able to break the ones at the end? Newbie said gruffly with a stern expression. Virtually all the formations they came across were ensnaring or killing formations. Ensnaring ones could be dealt with when they came across them, but they would be in danger whenever they came across powerful killing formations. Jian Chen did not even look at the two other groups behind. He lowered his head in thought for some time, before continuing onward with his group. They fell into another formation after taking 10 steps. The 8th floor of the hall was basically a floor of formations. The numbers were unimaginable. No matter which direction they walked in, they would fall into one in less than 10 steps. Jian Chen had considered using the White Tiger's powers to directly pass through to the 9th floor after being faced with these endless formations. However, his impressions of the Divine Hall had changed greatly after all the things he had encountered after coming in. A thought always lingered in his head, that the Octaterra Divine Hall was definitely not as simple as it seemed. Perhaps there was no legacy on the 8th floor, just another unknown danger waiting for them. As a result, Jian Chen gave up on the idea of using Xiao Bai. Instead, he chose to use a slower method, spending energy to break through the formations like everyone else. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. Everyone moved at an extremely slow rate in these 3 days. They had not even traversed a third of the remaining half. Every time Jian Chen's group broke through a formation, they needed to stop there and recover their exerted power. Even newbies was no longer an exception. Only Jian Chen remained energetic without any signs of weakness. Although Jian Chen had already faced many battles, the chaotic force within him could support him for a very long time as long as he did not use it like last time in the City of God. This was because each strand of chaotic force contained an extremely powerful energy, so his energy would be consumed much more slowly in comparison to ordinary people. The strength and depth of chaotic force could not be measured using ordinary forces. It was the supreme force in the world. Nothing could compare to it in the universe. The problem was that Jian Chen's chaotic force right now was not the true chaotic force. The chaotic body had been divided into 18 layers by the sword spirits, and his chaotic force would transform as he reached each layer. Only when he reached the 18th layer would it become true chaotic force. Only at that time would its strength be fully displayed. The other people only used a single day to recover under the support of ordinary pills. They continued on their way, breaking through formations. Right now, Thisnik was one step faster than everyone else. He took high-level pills, so he recovered his energy faster than everyone else. Time passed quickly and 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Jian Chen's group finally completed the remaining journey. They finally stood at the entrance of the 9th floor. They were all in horrible shapes. Their clothes were tattered while their faces were pale and haggard. They seemed like beggars, and this also applied to Jian Chen. The other people besides Jian Chen were wounded as well. They had walked on the edge of death several times with their lives on a thread. Thisnik and the other group emerged at the same time. They were in horrible shapes too, their tattered clothes matted with blood. Clearly, they had suffered in the formations, and there had been a decrease of people in both groups. Some had died to the formations. Ruler of the Turtle Clan, above is where the legacy of the Octaterra Emperor lies. Only one person can inherit it, but I just wonder who it will end up with in the end, Thisnik said emotionlessly to Jian Chen, before glancing coldly at all the others in the surroundings. He knew that the unity between everyone was only till they reached the end successfully. As soon as they faced the legacy of the Octaterra Emperor, they would all become enemies without any remorse. However, Thisnik only viewed one person importantly among all the people, and that was Jian Chen. He did not care about the others. Jian Chen said nothing, also glancing past everyone, but this time perhaps subconsciously. To him, no one standing here was ordinary. No one could be underestimated for making it here. Although many of them were not renowned, that was because they hid purposefully. Perhaps, there were other people no weaker than Thisnik among them, just not as dazzling and famed as Thisnik. This was especially applicable to the third group. Without someone like Thisnik as their leader, they had actually managed to make it here with the same speed. This made them even more complicated than they seemed. They were all of the 9th heavenly layer, but no one knew just how many people had yet to reveal their trump cards. Chapter 929. Baleful Force. The three groups did not begin fighting. They stood at the entrance to the 9th floor at the same time, examining it before continuing onward. Each person was filled with vigilance. Not only did they have to guard against the dangers from the hall, they also needed to guard against everyone else. No one dared to be careless. They climbed the long staircase and finally arrived on the 9th floor. However, they all became dumbfounded as it was not a majestic hall like they had imagined. Instead, there were 9 dark tunnels that led off to who knows where. Everyone could not help but come to a stop. They stared at the dark tunnel with frowns, while lights flickered in their eyes. This had completely exceeded their expectations. Can we only reach the true 9th floor by passing through these tunnels? An old man from the third group guessed. Jian Chen grimly scanned all 9 tunnels, before fully expanding his presence. He wanted to see what was inside each one. However, Jian Chen's presence suffered even greater suppressions here. He could only expand it to a radius of less than 100 meters of his sight. We've already come here. There's no path back now. It doesn't matter whether you want the legacy or you want to leave. You all need to advance past the 9th floor. Newbies, let's choose a tunnel, Jian Chen said gruffly. Newbies nodded. That's all we can do now that everything's like this. Soon afterward, Jian Chen casually chose a tunnel and left with newbies and the 3 other people that followed them. As Jian Chen's group disappeared down a tunnel, the 2 other groups also chose their own. Their groups remained together without separating. The tunnels seemed like bottlenecks. Although their entrances were not very big, they contained something entirely different. Jian Chen's group actually arrived in a huge space after passing through their tunnel. The space was circular and about 1 kilometer wide. 9 huge pillars stood in the surroundings. They were completely red and glowed with a demonic red light, spinning around the empty space. Boom! Suddenly, the huge stone door behind them slammed close with a rumble. The stone door was made of the same material as the door of the treasury on the 2nd floor, so it was terrifyingly tough. Their hearts all sank. They all felt an ill omen. Suddenly, a powerful energy began to ripple. The surrounding stone pillars began to shine with dazzling streaks of light that crossed mid-air. It formed a blood-red barrier around the entire region. There was no other color except red. It made them feel like they had entered another space. This is an extremely powerful formation, and it's a killing formation, growled Newbies. He was extremely stern. His hands immediately became golden as he made preparations for battle. Jian Chen also became grim. The king armament was already in his hands. He could feel the terror of this killing formation. From its influence alone, he could tell that it had far exceeded the power of any formation on the 8th floor. Suddenly, they heard a wave break. In the air, a red ocean descended as if it was completely composed of blood, turning the space into a sea of blood. The liquid constantly churned, tossed, and turned. It was like the tempestuous sea. Jian Chen and the others could even hear the howls of countless vengeful spirits. They formed horrendous ghostly faces, biting at the group with their bloody mouths. It was hair-raising. A faint layer of bloody mist floated slowly toward them, quickly enveloping them. The bloody mist could injure their souls. It immediately invaded their minds as soon as they drew close and caught them off guard. They immediately experienced a sharp pain in their heads and their heads began to whirl. Their minds had become slightly clouded now. This is baleful force. Jian Chen cried out. He was filled with disbelief. It was actually completely the same as the baleful force he felt from the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect. Jian Chen had come to an understanding toward the baleful force on the Tian Yuan continent. Apparently, it was a special energy formed from slaughter, and no one could use this energy other than the Bloodsword sect of the 3 great assassination organizations. Baleful force could affect the consciousness of people. There was no way to defend against it. The only choice a victim had was to endure it. It was said that if the baleful force was powerful enough, It could directly disperse the souls of its victim. It was extremely powerful. Baleful force is only cultivated by the assassins of the Blood Sword sect. Why would it be here? Jian Chen constantly asked himself. He was greatly perturbed. After all, this was the Octaterra Divine Hall, the place where the Octaterra Emperor used to live. Yet, there was actually baleful force in the formations here. Perhaps the Octaterra Emperor also possessed this power? Fortunately, the baleful force was not powerful enough to disperse their souls directly. At most, it would only affect them slightly and cut away some of their strength. Suddenly, the sea of blood began to churn even more violently. It slowly formed a blood-red 100-meter-tall giant who possessed a great, imposing manner. The giant's face was unclear, but as it stood there, it seemed to be reaching from the earth to the heavens. It radiated with a great pressure as if it was God. At this moment, the giant moved. He extended a finger toward Jian Chen's finger. With that, the giant's arm constantly grew longer while the finger itself expanded in size. It grew to several hundred meters in length, before shooting toward them. Jian Chen's king armament radiated with a dark light as energy filled the entire space with devastating aura. Newbie's hands glowed with a dazzling goldenly light, while powerful energy constantly churned. Mog and the other two had all pulled out their weapons as well. No one held anything back, striking the huge finger together with their most powerful attacks. Boom! The attacks from the five collided with the giant's finger. Violent energy erupted, wreaking havoc in the entire space. The giant's finger paused slightly and came to a halt. Everyone flew backward without exception and became pale. Newbies and the others even vomited blood violently, now heavily injured. Meanwhile, some blood flowed from the corner of Jian Chen's lips. He was heavily wounded as well. The five of them shot back by several dozen meters before colliding with the edge of the barrier. Blood immediately spurted violently from their mouths again. Jian Chen climbed to his feet with a leap and stared at the blood-red giant in astoundment. He was extremely stern. The giant's strength had far exceeded what they anticipated. Jian Chen was certain that it was at least at the 5th heavenly layer of Saint King or even the 6th. It definitely was not something they could deal with. God damn it. This formation is too powerful. It actually materialized such a powerful thing. How do we fight it? Newbie stood up as he swore, immediately pulling out a large handful of Class 6 Radiant Spirit Pills and wolfing them down. Mog and the other two pulled out jade bottles from their space rings. A jade green pill rolled out from their bottles at the same time and they took it as they winced in pain. Their pills were clearly much more powerful than the Radiant Spirit Pills. Their complexions immediately took a turn for the better with unbelievable speed. They were actually healing much faster than newbies. A vast pressure appeared from ahead and the red giant began to move once again. Its finger shot toward them with a terrifying force just like before. Despair filled the eyes of Mog and the three others. The giant was just too powerful. They could not fend off a second strike right now as they were still injured. Jian Chen stared fixedly at the giant finger as it rapidly drew closer. Suddenly, a golden streak of light shot from the center of his forehead and the saint artifact appeared in his hand. He immediately opened an entry to it and a towering sword chi radiated from within. The emperor armament which was trapped inside flew out, colliding with the finger as soon as it appeared. With a boom, the giant finger was destroyed by the emperor armament's attack. It scattered into the sea of blood. However, in the next moment, most of the blood flowed toward the giant. It fused into the giant's body. The giant's arm regrew. In that moment, its attention became focused on the emperor armament and its giant red hand directly grabbed at it. The emperor armament raged. It radiated a powerful sword chi radiated and chopped off the giant's hand mid-air. However, the giant was indestructible. Its missing limb immediately transformed into a pool of blood and fused with its body, allowing it to be regrown. I hope the emperor armament can destroy the blood giant. Newbies was elated. The flames of hope seemed to be ignited within him and the others. The emperor armament, however, surprised them with what it did next. It did not bother with the blood giant anymore, directly flying to the edge of the formation and chopping at the space there. It carved a huge gap, before fleeing through it. The five of them were stunned, but they soon returned to their senses. They charged at the gap, pushing their speeds to the utmost limits. With the help of his secret techniques, Newbies charged in front. He was the first one to leave, followed by Mog's trio. Jian Chen had been relatively further from the gap, so he was last. Chapter 930. Assassins of the Serpent God Hall. The 5 of them were stunned, but they soon returned to their senses. They charged at the gap, pushing their speeds to the utmost limits. With the help of his secret techniques, newbies charged in front. He was the first one to leave, followed by MOG's trio. Jian Chen had been relatively further from the gap, so he was last. The blood-red giant that had materialized in the formation space was at least as strong as a 5th heavenly layer Saint King. It was not something they could fend off. If they remained there would only be death. Yet the Emperor armament had now punched a hole through the formation. It naturally became the target where everyone fled toward, as they all knew that perhaps that was the only way they could survive. As a result, they all moved as fast as they could. Emperor armament, don't you dare run away. I've subdued you once, so I can subdue you again. Jian Chen turned into a blur, rushing toward the gap with lightning speed. Jian Chen had been forced to let out the Emperor armament. Right now, probably only the Emperor armament could fend off the blood giant. However, he had never expected the outcome to be like this. The blood giant was indeed not the Emperor armament's opponent, but the Emperor armament did not behave as Jian Chen had wished. It did not kill the blood giant. Instead, it cut through the formation and fled. Jian Chen's head was filled with thoughts of the Emperor armament. Now that it had fled, he felt extremely worried. He knew that maybe a sliver of its owner's presence existed within it, so it possessed a certain level of intelligence. After suffering from the Saint artifact before, it would definitely take precautions against it. It would definitely not be as easy this time to suck it into the artifact space. Very quickly, the trio arrived before the gap. Jian Chen was less than 10 meters behind them, but just when they were about to pass through, a cold sliver of light flashed across their eyes in unison. They suddenly all turned around and each struck Jian Chen with a palm strike. Although the 3 of them were still injured, the power of their 3 strikes could not be ignored. They quickly surged toward Jian Chen. Right now, Jian Chen was distracted by the thoughts of the Emperor armament and did not expect that MOG and the other 2 would attack him at this very moment. When he managed to react, the 3 attacks had already arrived before him. Jian Chen's face changed abruptly. A cold light shone in his eyes as he barely managed to lash out with his king armament. It collided with the 3 attacks. With a rumble, the violent ripples of energy knocked against Jian Chen, causing him to come to a stop. Afterward, he was knocked backward uncontrollably, only coming to a halt several hundred meters away. The gap made by the Emperor armament quickly closed up. Jian Chen could clearly see the 3 of them standing outside and sneering back at him through the gap. Jian Chen's face darkened greatly as killing intent filled his heart. It radiated outward uncontrollably, causing the surrounding temperature to drop drastically. The gap had closed up very quickly. Jian Chen was now without a way out. MOG, I will definitely kill you all, Jian Chen said coldly. His icy voice seemed to come from a god of death and was heard clearly by them. The gap closed completely as soon as Jian Chen finished his words, trapping him inside. The originally spacious outside area was enveloped by a blood-red cover. There was only an extremely narrow tunnel, where MOG's group and newbies currently stood. Newbie saw everything that had happened just then. His face instantly sank, while a vast killing intent poured from his body. It surged toward the sky. You actually dare to attack Jian Chen? I, the great newbies, will tear you all to shreds. Newbie's eyes became bloodshot as his golden hands immediately reached toward the trio. In that moment, MOG and the other 2 seemed like completely different people. They all knew just how powerful Newbies was, but they viewed his attack as nothing. Their eyes were filled with scorn. A vast power rushed from them, quickly condensing into suits of armors that protected them. Newbies' hands were unable to break through their armors. All it did was make them take a few steps back. This is a Saint King's power. Didn't you use it all up already? How do you still have more? Newbies was shocked. He immediately became stern. The 3 of them immediately sneered when they heard this. One of them said, "Used all of it up? Hee, that's just to trick you. Newbies, the powers on the 3 of us may not be from Hall Elder level experts, but they're still from 16th star experts. Do you think you can break through them with just your power?" Newbies replied coldly, "Do you think you'll be able to obtain the Octaterra Emperor's legacy just like that? You can't forget that there's Thisnik other than Jian Chen. Without Jian Chen, you won't be able to win against Thisnik with just your Saint King's power. Who said we wanted the legacy? MOG stared at newbies and jeered. Our final target is not the legacy but to kill the three of you. If it weren't for the fact that our clans might get dragged in if we did it before so many people, we would have acted long ago. But isn't it convenient now? We can use this formation to finish off Jian Chen, saving us some energy. Our remaining power will be enough to finish you off. What? You came here to kill us? Newbies was shocked as this had completely surpassed his expectations. Correct. You offended the serpent god whole. Did you really think you would be safe and sound hiding in the territory of the sea goddess hall? MOG said. So that's it. You're people of the serpent god hole. Newbies suddenly reached an understanding. We're not people of the serpent god hall, just people recruited by the serpent god hall. Newbies, since you know everything now, it's about time we send you off. Cold battle intent appeared in their eyes as immense Saint King's power rushed from their bodies. It was shaped into 3 sea creatures that howled furiously, charging toward newbies. This was not their own power but the Saint King's power deposited by a 16th star expert. Its power was tremendous. Newbies became stern, turning around to flee. Although he was confident in himself, he did not believe he could endure such tremendous attacks. A casual strike from a 16th star expert was enough to heavily injure him. If he took on 3 of them, he would only be barely alive if he did not die. Most importantly, he had no clue just how strong the expert who deposited his power into the 3 of them was. Was he of the 5th heavenly layer or the 8th heavenly layer? Maybe even of the 9th heavenly layer? However, no matter how newbies fled, the attacks caught up very quickly. Newbies also decided to risk everything when he saw how he could not escape. Roaring at the sky, 2 lights, 1 gold and 1 silver, emerged from within him. The lights quickly turned into densely packed scales that covered every inch of his body. Flames of 2 different colors burned on his scales, becoming more vigorous as they burnt. His scales began to bulge at an unbelievable rate. Newbies revealed an expression of pain as he roared through gritted teeth. Inherited secret technique, explosion of gold and silver scales. This was a self-mutilating attack, blowing up the scales all over him to injure the surrounding people. Not only was this attack extremely powerful, it was laced with venom as well. However, the price to cast this secret technique was just too great. Not only would it be a big blow to his essence, he would lose all his protective scales. He would need to endure decades or even centuries of agonizing pain to slowly recover his essence, before shedding his skin and regrowing his scales. Newbies, I'm here. Stop. Jian Chen's voice appeared in Newbie's head at that very moment. Newbie's eyes lit up and he subconsciously stopped his secret technique. A golden light began to glow before him and a golden tower sailed through the air. It shielded him. The golden tower was 10 meters tall and 2 meters wide. It landed heavily on the ground, causing it to tremble gently. Boom! The 3 attacks directly collided with it but the 2 remained still. The tower had blocked the 3 attacks for newbies and he had emerged completely unscathed. A great tiger roar soon boomed out. With a white flash, an awe-inspiring white tiger had appeared behind the trio. The white tiger was 3 meters long and possessed wings on its back. As it stood there, a certain pressure immediately began to descend upon the surroundings. It was like the ruler of the world and its condescending aura was even denser than a saint emperor's. A figure sat on the back of the tiger and to no surprise, it was Jian Chen. MOG's group looked at Jian Chen behind them and their eyes bulged immediately. They were overwhelmed with disbelief. Jian Chen, you've escaped. How is that possible? You charged out from the formation. Did you break through it? Impossible, the gap from the Emperor armament had completely closed up. How could you have come out? All 3 of them exclaimed in surprise as their complexions became extremely ugly. Patting the tiger's back gently with his left hand, it actually leaped into the blood-red cover to its side as if it had received some instructions. They had entered the formation once again. The Saint King's power passed through the location where Jian Chen previously stood, colliding heavily with the wall behind. Boom! The entire hall trembled slightly. Their attacks could shake the hall, so it could be inferred that these attacks were roughly just as powerful as the ownerless Emperor armament. A white figure appeared behind the trio. Jian Chen had left the formation once again with the help of the white tiger, arriving soundlessly behind the three of them. Jian Chen leaped off the white tiger's back without any hesitation and rushed at Emoji's group. He stabbed out 3 times with his king armament that shone with a dark light from the chaotic force. Ding, ding, ding. Before they could react, the 3 stabs struck the back of their heads accurately. However, they were covered in a layer of condensed armor, and their heads were not an exception to its protection. Jian Chen's strike had failed to harm them. The force from the weapon caused them to stumble a few steps forward, while a tiny crack had already appeared on the back of their condensed helmets. Jian Chen failed to break through the protection with a single strike, but he managed to damage it quite heavily. Jian Chen did not stop. His arm jolted violently and he continued to stab out. The king armament became a flurry of blurs, enveloping the 3 of them. With a series of closely packed sounds, Jian Chen struck the 3 of them over a dozen times in an instant with his rain-like attacks. Web-like cracks appeared on their armors and quickly spread. The expressions of the trio changed. Saint King's power surged from within them immediately. They wanted to use it to face up against Jian Chen again. Jian Chen knew just how terrifying this power was, so he did not fight back at all. With a gesture of his hand, the 10-meter-tall Saint artifact immediately flew up from behind to block the 3 attacks. Their strikes that could even shake the palace slammed into the artifact, but it did not even tremble. It resisted the attacks without the slightest effort. "I'd like to see just how much power you have left," Jian Chen said coldly. Afterward, he continued his wild flurry of attacks with the Saint artifact occasionally shielding him. The power within the 3 of them quickly disappeared under their rapid consumption. They had lost their ability to contend against Jian Chen without the Saint King's power, so they were felled very quickly. All of their souls were wiped out by Jian Chen. With their deaths, the blood within them was quickly sucked away by the hall. They soon became shriveled corpses. Jian Chen removed their space rings, while the Saint artifact also shrank and flew into his hand. Jian Chen arrived before the white tiger and gently petted its snow-white fur. "There's not just the 2 of us. There are some friends who had always concealed their strength," Thisnik said coldly as he stared at the 4 other people. There were 2 old men, 1 old woman, and a middle-aged man. They all seemed extremely ordinary, unable to catch anyone's attention. Chapter 932, The Octaterra Emperor, 2. The middle-aged man belonged to the same group as Thisnik. He had always kept his strength well concealed and had maintained an extremely low profile. As a result, he had not been discovered by Thisnik, even after spending so much time beside him. Thisnik glared past the other people, before staring toward the depths of the hall. His eyes burned with interest. A huge sculpture stood in the depths. It was a sculpture of a middle-aged man and it seemed extremely lifelike, like a real person. He was filled with charm. Standing there, he seemed completely like a part of the surroundings, without any difference. Staring at the sculpture, all of them unconsciously felt as if a tremendous pressure had entered their souls. It was like they were prostrating themselves to it. "Is this the Octaterra Emperor?" Jian Chen struggled to remain calm as he stared at the sculpture. However, Jian Chen soon remembered the advice from Hall Elder Hong of the Sea Goddess Hall. He then looked around as he thought. Elder Hong said that other than the legacy, this divine hall is the most valuable item present. As long as I can find the control center, I can control this divine hall. So where is it? Jian Chen, why isn't the Emperor armament here? Where'd it go? Suddenly, Jian Chen heard Newbie's mental message. Jian Chen became slightly stunned. A sliver of light flashed across his eyes and he looked around carefully. He actually found no traces of the Emperor armament. How is it like this? We clearly went through the door broken by the Emperor armament to get here, so why are there no traces of it? Jian Chen thought. He felt uneasy. At this moment, Thisnik spoke. "If I've guessed correctly, the Octaterra Emperor's legacy must be in that sculpture, because that's the only thing that's completely intact. But there are 7 people here, while only 1 person can obtain the legacy. Does anyone have any good idea to deal with this problem?" Everyone's eyes immediately began to flicker in thought as they heard this. They looked around cautiously to prevent anyone from catching them off guard. No one was not enticed by the Octaterra Emperor's legacy. They had all exhausted such great efforts to get here. How could they just give up so easily now? The hall immediately fell into a deathly silence. The 7 of them stood there silently as the atmosphere became suffocating. A slight killing intent gradually permeated the entire hall. Allow me to check whether the legacy is in the sculpture at all. The suffocating atmosphere was finally broken. The old woman pointed out, and some Saint King's power immediately shot out and struck the sculpture forcefully. No one stopped her. Instead, they all stared intently at the sculpture. They were unsure if the sculpture was left behind by the Octaterra Emperor all those years ago, or if it contained the legacy at all. They all wanted to borrow the old woman to test the truth of the sculpture. Boom! The sculpture was more fragile than they had imagined. The power easily shattered the sculpture, causing stones to fly everywhere. Everyone became disappointed when they saw that. They no longer believed that the sculpture would contain the Octaterra Emperor's legacy, seeing how easily it had been destroyed. However, an azure light was revealed in that very moment. Where the head of the shattered sculpture was, a hazy azure ball of light floated silently. Everyone immediately focused their attention on the ball of light. Thisnik even cried out involuntarily, "Is that the legacy?" Everyone's faces twitched when they heard Thisnik. Temptation burned in their eyes. Even Jian Chen and newbies were not exceptions. This was the legacy of a Saint Emperor. It contained everything the Saint Emperor had learned, including his comprehension of the laws of the world. Reaching Saint Emperor would only be a matter of time for whoever obtained it. No. Suddenly, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. He stared fixedly at the light and revealed an uneasy expression. His presence was extremely powerful, far greater than Thisnik or the others. He could actually feel the rippling of a soul within the azure light. It was very weak but extremely energetic. The soul is conscious. The azure light is just a seal, preventing the soul's ripples from spreading outward and being detected. A sudden thought appeared in Jian Chen's head, which caused him to pale slightly. He had suddenly reached an unbelievable conclusion after thinking back to all the weird matters that had occurred in the Octaterra Divine Hall. The Octaterra Emperor was still alive. With the whistling of wind, Thisnik and the 4 others shot toward the azure ball of light. They were lightning fast. Newbies did not hesitate either, but just as he wanted to join in, Jian Chen suddenly extended his hand and gripped Newbie's shoulder. Through a communication technique, he said, "Don't go. It's not as simple as it seems." Newbies almost had a blind faith in Jian Chen after knowing him for so many years. He immediately suppressed his rashness after what Jian Chen warned him. Thisnik and the 4 others arrived before the light in a flash, reaching toward it in unison. Suddenly, something happened. The azure light disappeared, replaced by a dazzling red light. Before they could react, it shot toward them with unbelievable speed, immediately disappearing into their heads. Ha ha ha, I've long awaited this day. It won't be long till I return. Sea Goddess Hall, Serpent God Hall, Heaven Spirit Hall, I'll be wiping you all out soon after I take these bodies. A wild, savage laughter rang out in the air. Both Jian Chen and newbies became grim when they saw the sudden change in the situation. Their hearts sank in particular because of the wild laughter. Is this the voice of the Octaterra Emperor? The Octaterra Emperor is not dead. Newbie's voice trembled slightly. In that moment both of them understood. The Octaterra Divine Hall was actually all a scheme for the Emperor's revival. Jian Chen's face darkened completely as he said, "I finally understand why the Divine Hall would suck away the blood from the vicious beasts. It's all a scheme of the Octaterra Emperor. He only exists as a soul right now, and it must have become extremely weak after so many years of slumber. It needs to absorb the vital essence present in the blood of the experts and beasts to heal." Newbie's complexion became extremely ugly as he said hurriedly, "Jian Chen, we can't stay here anymore. We need to leave." Jian Chen shook his head powerlessly. The Octaterra Divine Hall is actually a trap. That whatever legacy is fake. No wonder we couldn't find any way out earlier. There's probably only a way into this Divine Hall and no way out at all. We can't leave now. The 5 people all howled out, tossing and turning on the floor as they clutched their heads in agony. "Ha ha ha, there's actually a ruler's body. I'll be taking your body." The savage voice rang out in the hall once again. With a few explosions, the heads of the 4 others blew open.
Their souls had been wiped out, while the red light in their heads all gathered in Thisnika's head.
The red light was the soul of someone. Octaterra Emperor. You're the Octaterra Emperor. You're actually not dead. Thisnik cried out as he resisted the agonizing pain. He had already become completely pale, feeling his soul being devoured part by the more powerful soul. Octaterra Emperor, don't you dare devour my soul. A killing intent shone in Thisnika's eyes. A terrifying energy rippled within him, filling the entire hall with a devastating aura. The hall began to tremble violently. In that moment, the entire hall seemed to be shaking gently. The tremendous power from Thisnik seemed to be able to destroy the entire place. God damn it. This is an emperor's power. You actually have an emperor's power in you, the soul cried out in terror. He was once an emperor, but he had now been reduced to a fragile soul after all. He could deal with saint rulers like Thisnik easily, but he had no power to fight back against an emperor's power. Even just a strand was enough to wipe out his soul. Immediately, the Octaterra Emperor refused to stay in Thisnika's body for even a moment longer. The soul immediately flew out, shooting toward Jian Chen and newbies. The soul was extremely fast, arriving before Jian Chen in the blink of an eye. Before Jian Chen could even react, it had disappeared into his head. Jian Chen's expression changed and he instantly paled. His muscles constantly jerked, clearly in great pain. However, Jian Chen's soul was much more powerful than Thisnika's and other people at the same level. Although the Octaterra Emperor's entry into his head brought on agonizing pain, it was within the range he could endure. Jian Chen, are you all right? Newbies cried out from beside him. However, Jian Chen could not hear him at all. His consciousness was now within his sea of consciousness with the soul of the Octaterra Emperor. Jian Chen currently floated mid-air in his sea of consciousness, while a young man who seemed to be in his 20s stood opposite of him. The young man wore blood-red robes while his face was filled with malevolence. Even his pupils and hair were red as if he was dyed in blood. You're not the Octaterra Emperor. Jian Chen stared intently at the young man. He was extremely stern. Chapter 933. A Battle of Souls. The red-robed young man who stood before Jian Chen in his sea of consciousness could not help but laugh wildly when he heard Jian Chen's words. His blood-red pupils were cold, filled with viciousness and bloodlust. I'm not that weak little Octaterra. Octaterra's soul has been devoured by me long ago.
Other than him, I've devoured the soul of that Somic as well.
Today, you will be the third person I devour and I'll be taking your body afterward. Do you know how great of an honor this will be to you? Brat. Don't resist. Any resistance before me is useless. Just put your mind at ease and become one with me, sneered the young man. Never would I have thought that the blood demon emperor who fell tens of thousands of years would still be alive. Moreover, he's even devoured the souls of 2 other emperors. Jian Chen's complexion was dark. He had completely grasped the young man's identity now. He was the blood demon emperor, the saint emperor that had heavily injured the hall masters of the sea goddess hall and the serpent god hall. In that exchange, he had taken the life of the heaven spirit hall's hallmaster several tens of thousands of years ago. Blood demon emperor, you were indeed very strong, but now you're just a soul. You probably can't even handle 16th star experts in your current form, so all you can do is attempt to take the bodies of people like me. But do you really think you will succeed? Jian Chen replied coldly. At the same time, his sea of consciousness began to churn. A soul far greater than a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler appeared. This was Jian Chen's soul. Your soul is indeed very strong, but it cannot pose a threat to me. Come, don't resist. Fuse with me, the great blood demon emperor. You will become me after it's done. Soon, your name will rock through the entire sea realm.
You will become the strongest among the sea race, and you will be the recipient of the respect and dread of countless people.
Think about just how glorious that is. As long as you fuse with me, you will be able to enjoy this supreme glory. A thin layer of baleful force filled the entire sea of consciousness as he spoke in an attempt to affect Jian Chen's mind and thoughts in order to reach his objective. The Blood Demon Emperor had realized Jian Chen's extraordinary areas long ago. Not only was his soul much greater than 9th heavenly layer saint rulers, the Emperor could feel 2 extremely powerful energies in the sea of consciousness. He felt threatened by them, which was why he said so much to Jian Chen. Jian Chen's sea of consciousness began to tremble gently. Jian Chen was unable to defend against the baleful force. All he could do was resist it.
The baleful force had already begun to affect his soul.
Do you really think I'm easy to trick like a kid? You're dreaming if you want to devour my soul and take my body.
I definitely will not let you do as you wish, Jian Chen rebuked mercilessly.
The Blood Demon Emperor became furious as killing intent filled his eyes. He no longer had the patience to try and persuade Jian Chen. I'll give you one more chance. Are you going to let me devour your soul or do you want to fuse with me? What's the difference? It'll all end in my death. But do you really think you have the power to devour my soul? A scornful sneer formed on Jian Chen's lips. He had fused with the sword spirits long ago. This meant that if the Blood Demon Emperor wanted to devour his soul, it was equivalent to devouring the sword spirits. The Azulite sword spirits were still weak, but they were still the sword spirits of divine swords in the past. Even when the Azulite swords broke, they did not die, so how could they be devoured by a mere Blood Demon Emperor? Jian Chen had also realized that the Blood Demon Emperor's soul was still very weak. It was not as strong as he had imagined. The only people it could probably deal with easily was other 9th Heavenly Layer Saint rulers like Thisnik. Even if I have to suffer the outcome of greatly damaging my soul, I'll take your body since you're not cooperating. I'd like to see how you defend against by Chi of Slaughter. He suddenly disappeared completely, turning into a bloody mist as he constantly expanded in Jian Chen's sea of consciousness. Jian Chen immediately revealed an expression of agony. His sea of consciousness began to shake violently as if there was a great earthquake. The Blood Demon Emperor's Chi of Slaughter was an evolution of the baleful force. Not only did it possess the same abilities, it was much more powerful. His Chi of Slaughter was devouring Jian Chen's soul bit by bit. A golden light suddenly appeared at that moment and filled Jian Chen's sea of consciousness. A completely golden tower was currently enlarging in the depths of his sea of consciousness, reaching several thousand meters tall in the blink of an eye. The tower was like an anchor, immediately stabilizing Jian Chen's sea of conscious with its appearance. The Blood Demon Emperor's Chi of Slaughter was no longer able to harm Jian Chen. What is this thing? It can block my Chi of Slaughter. The Blood Demon Emperor's surprised voice rang out in Jian Chen's sea of consciousness. It was filled with disbelief. The golden light enveloped the entire place, resisting the damage of the Chi of Slaughter for Jian Chen. It then began to gather rapidly, actually forcing the Chi of Slaughter into one region of the sea of consciousness, before it was forced into the form of a young man again. This was Jian Chen's sea of consciousness. As the Saint artifact had taken Jian Chen as its master, it was able to function with much more power here than outside. The Blood Demon Emperor could do nothing against the Saint artifact's powers. What is this thing? It can block my Chi of Slaughter. And how has it appeared in your sea of consciousness? The Blood Demon Emperor cried out. Even though he was once an experienced and knowledgeable Saint Emperor, he had never even heard of a weird matter like the event unfolding before his eyes. Using his thoughts, a sword immediately materialized before Jian Chen. It shot toward the Blood Demon Emperor's soul with lightning speed. The sword was condensed from Jian Chen's soul. In his sea of consciousness, he was unable to use chaotic force. As a consequence, any advantages of the chaotic body was nullified as well. All he could do was battle the Blood Demon Emperor with his soul. Your soul is not weak, but it can't harm me, sneered the Blood Demon Emperor. In that moment, he had finally realized that the Saint artifact could only protect Jian Chen and did not possess any combat abilities. This allowed him to relax quite a lot. The sword passed through the Blood Demon Emperor's body, unable to cause any harm at all. Haha, I already said you can't harm me. My soul may not be at its peak, but it's not something a mere 14th star sea soul warrior like you can injure, sneered the Blood Demon Emperor. I beg to differ, said Jian Chen. His figure quickly faded away, disappearing into the sea of consciousness. Blood Demon Emperor, I wonder if I can harm you if I use my full strength. Jian Chen's voice rang out from everywhere. The entire region soon began to churn violently, while an even more terrifying soul formed a sword, quickly shooting toward the Blood Demon Emperor. The Blood Demon Emperor bellowed and a strand of Chi of Slaughter immediately detached itself from him to receive Jian Chen's sword. However, before it could leave him, it was forced back by the Saint artifact. Right now, he was ensnared by the artifact, losing virtually all power to retaliate. All he could do was watch helplessly as Jian Chen's sword approached him. The sword directly passed through the Blood Demon Emperor, but it was not like before. He was no longer able to remain unscathed, immediately dulling slightly in color. "You can't kill me!" The Blood Demon Emperor howled upward. His body constantly shrunk, turning into an 8-centimeter tall dwarf.
It allowed his soul be concentrated. He then rammed wildly against the Saint Artifact's power in an attempt to break free. He knew that he would not be able to cause Jian Chen any harm, let alone devour his soul.
If he did not break free, he would not be able to expand his soul, let alone devour Jian Chen. But no matter how hard he tried, he failed. He could not even make the golden light tremble.
Another sword quickly condensed in this moment, shooting toward the shrunken soul of the Blood Demon Emperor in a flash.
However, the attack failed to harm him now that his soul was extremely concentrated. "Unless you're a 15th star expert, you won't be able to harm me. Brat, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to devour you anymore, so why don't you let me out?" Neither of us can defeat the other, even if we continue like this, the Blood Demon Emperor finally gave in.
His did indeed possess the strength that allowed him to behave arrogantly in the past, but he was no longer as great as before.
Any 15th star expert would be enough to wipe him out in his current state. "Blood Demon Emperor, if I've guessed correctly, your soul has only become so powerful after absorbing the vital essence in the blood from those people. If you didn't have their blood, you should still be sleeping and would dissipate without much more time. I'd like to see just how long you can last with the power you've recovered from the vital essence right now." Jian Chen's voice was extremely cold as he constantly pummeled the Blood Demon Emperor with attacks. The Blood Demon Emperor's face immediately sank as if Jian Chen was spot on. "So that's the case. Blood Demon Emperor, I definitely won't be letting you off since you had ill intentions toward me. I'll waste your power right now and make you dissipate completely," said Jian Chen.
A sliver of determination appeared in the Blood Demon Emperor's eyes.
"Humph, who do you think I am? I'll make you pay a price as well for wanting to wipe me out." Chapter 934. Founder of the Blood Sword Sect. A sliver of determination appeared in the Blood Demon Emperor's eyes. "Humph, who do you think I am? I'll make you pay a price as well for wanting to wipe me out. Why don't you break free first if you want me to pay a price as well? Because right now, you can't harm me at all," Jian Chen's cold voice rang out. His soul was currently protected by the Saint Artifact, and this protection could not be destroyed by anything below Saint Emperor. He did not believe the Blood Demon Emperor in his current state had that power. "Humph, I'll break through your defense right now." The Blood Demon Emperor's soul began to condense rapidly again, turning into a thumb-sized orb from his dwarf form. The orb was completely blood-red and radiated with a demonic crimson light. It showed vague signs of suppressing the golden light from the Saint Artifact. "With half my soul as tribute, I condense the Empyrean Demon Orb and request the Empyrean Demon Orb to break through this tower." The Blood Demon Emperor's voice resounded from the orb. Abruptly, his soul weakened at a rapid rate while the orb's light increased. It actually broke free from the golden light's binding and enveloped Jian Chen's sea of consciousness. "Empyrean Demon Orb. It's actually the Empyrean Demon Orb. Why would the Empyrean Demon Monarch's Empyrean Demon Orb be here?" Suddenly, the sword spirits' voices rang out in the sea of consciousness. They were filled with surprise. Soon after, two dazzling lights, one azure and one purple, rose from the depths of the sea of consciousness and quickly expanded completely. The expansion of the blood-red light from the Empyrean Demon Orb came to a halt with the appearance of the two different colored light. The lights from the sword spirits quickly filled up Jian Chen's entire sea of consciousness, even surrounding the blood-red light from the Empyrean Demon Orb. Afterward, it quickly faded, causing Jian Chen's sea of consciousness to become blurry. It turned into a chaotic mess with nothing to be seen. The only thing visible was a hazy gray. "Empyrean Demon Orb, you're trying to harm our master. Even the Empyrean Demon Monarch didn't have that courage, let alone you. If you're smart, you better piss off quickly. Don't make us attack you." Zi Ying's voice resounded from everywhere. An image of the stars suddenly appeared in the chaotic space. Within this image, countless people battled fiercely in outer space. It was so intense that worlds fell and the void shattered with countless planets destroyed to their battle. Corpses that radiated with powerful auras floated in outer space, while golden blood filled the entire area. Every single drop contained an unimaginably powerful energy, able to kill off Saint Emperors without any difficulties at all. Two giant swords stood among the crowded battleground. They were both thousands of meters long and shone with purple and azure lights. Wherever they passed by, the surroundings would become littered with body pieces. Countless people had died to the two swords. The power of the swords was enough to shake the heavens and devastate whole worlds. Everything presented in the image was real. It was a battle the sword spirits had experienced in the past, which had been projected through their abilities. The Empyrean demon orb began to shake violently, as if it was quaking in fear. Its red light was quickly retracted, completely hidden within it in the blink of an eye. It could not help but descend slightly in the air as if it was submitting itself. It did not dare to challenge the sword spirits at all.
No, no, no.
This can't be real. This can't be real, it's fake, it's fake. This is all fake. The Blood Demon Emperor shrieked in fright from within the Empyrean demon orb. His voice was filled with terror. The sword spirits had just projected matters that had happened in their past, involuntarily sucking the Blood Demon Emperor into it. Everything seemed to have unfolded right before him. Not only could he feel just how terrifying these people were, he could sense just how horrifyingly powerful each casual strike was. Every single person in the image had reached far beyond the realms of Saint Emperor. Even when he was at his peak, he would not have been able to block even a casual attack from anyone. Just a droplet of their blood would be enough to wipe out his soul. The strength of these people had completely exceeded the Blood Demon Emperor's understandings and reckoning. Terror immediately began to overwhelm his mind. I don't believe it.
I refuse to believe that it's real.
It's all fake.
Shrieks from the Blood Demon Emperor constantly rang out from the Empyrean demon orb. He had expended thousands of years, cultivating painstakingly to reach Saint Emperor. He was one of the few great experts in the sea realm, and even the three halls feared him.
He was glorious.
Yet right now, he had discovered just how puny all the power he had obtained in those thousands of years was.
It overwhelmed him greatly when he found out just how insignificant it was. He refused to accept it. Half his soul is already consumed. Master, why don't you quickly wipe it out? Zi Ying's voice rang out.
Jian Chen immediately condensed a sword without any hesitation and shot it mercilessly toward the Empyrean demon orb.
Jian Chen's sword struck the Empyrean demon orb accurately, causing it to tremble gently. Immediately, a chilling shriek rang out.
It was from the Blood Demon Emperor. The Blood Demon Emperor's soul was now only half as powerful as it was before, so it was unable to resist Jian Chen's attack at all. Empyrean demon orb, take me out of here quickly. The Blood Demon Emperor's voice was filled with panic. He could feel that he was rapidly approaching death. As he meditated while he neared his death, the Blood Demon Emperor that had hidden in the Empyrean demon orb suddenly emerged in a crucial moment, catching him off guard and devouring his soul when he was weak.
This extended the Blood Demon Emperor's time.
Another 10,000 years passed and the Octaterra Emperor discovered the Samic Divine Hall. He too took it for himself, renaming it as the Octaterra Divine Hall. In the thousands of years he remained in possession of the hall, the Octaterra Emperor never discovered the Blood Demon Emperor. As he too faced the end of his life, he was not willing to see his legacy just end there. As a result, he spent the last few years arranging and modifying the Divine Hall, wanting to leave behind his legacy. The Octaterra Emperor meditated on the 9th floor of the hall as he faced the end of his life. His life was severed and his soul rapidly dissipated, growing extremely weak. However, he never thought he would be faced with the sudden attack of the Blood Demon Emperor's soul in the final moments. The Blood Demon Emperor wanted to devour his soul. He was much stronger than the Samic Emperor, so he used everything he had to fight the Blood Demon Emperor in a battle of souls in the end. They turned the 9th floor into a mess, but his soul was still devoured in the end. The Blood Demon Emperor's soul was injured in the battle, but he managed to recover by devouring the Octaterra Emperor's soul. He then used the Octaterra Emperor's handiwork, modifying his setup of the Divine Hall. As a result, the Octaterra Divine Hall that was originally for choosing the Octaterra Emperor's successor was turned into the Blood Demon Emperor's scheme for revival in the end.
So that's what happened. I never thought there would be so much history to the Octaterra Divine Hall. This Divine Hall was originally created by the Blood Demon Emperor, but it changed hands twice afterward, which was why its name changed. The souls of the Samic and Octaterra Emperor had all been devoured by the Blood Demon Emperor. I never thought that the Blood Sword sect of the Tian Yuan continent was founded by the Blood Demon Emperor several tens of thousands of years ago. Jian Chen was unable to remain composed after he learned all this. His heart churned wildly. In particular, the matters regarding the Blood Sword sect overwhelmed him with disbelief. The Blood Demon Emperor was actually the founder of the Blood Sword sect. Chapter 935. The Empyrean Demon Monarch. The Blood Demon Emperor's soul sure is powerful. His soul's dissipated in my sea of consciousness, so I should be able to absorb it and strengthen my own soul, thought Jian Chen. Without any hesitation, he collected his thoughts and began absorbing the soul. On the 9th floor of the hall, Jian Chen currently sat on the ground with his legs crossed. His eyes were closed. No one knew exactly what had happened. Newbies paced about worriedly beside him. He knew that the Blood Demon Emperor's soul had entered Jian Chen's sea of consciousness, but he could do nothing about the current situation. All he could do was wait on one side. Jian Chen, I really can't help you this time. You have to survive. Nothing must happen to you. Newbies prayed inside. Although he had only agreed to follow Jian Chen for 10 years after being lured out of the Cross Mountains by a corpse of a clansman, the relationship between the two of them had unknowingly undergone great changes after so many years. They were no longer bound by profit and had become close friends. As a result, newbies felt extremely worried when Jian Chen faced up against such dangers. Thisnik slowly stood up from the ground at this moment. When the Blood Demon Emperor had entered his mind earlier, he had devoured a small portion of his soul, causing great injury to Thisnik. He had only recovered just now. Thisnik stared coldly at Jian Chen as killing intent poured from his eyes without restraint. He said coldly, Octoterra Emperor, I never thought that you'd still be alive, much less think that this entire divine hall was just a scheme of yours. You wanted to draw us in from the outside so you could choose a talented body to possess. Thisnik had no idea that it was the Blood Demon Emperor. Even now, he still believed that person who tried to devour his soul was the Octoterra Emperor. Octoterra Emperor, the ruler of the Turtle Clan's soul must have been devoured by you already. It'll still take you some time for you gain full control over the body, so that'll be the perfect time to kill you. Thisnik's face was sunken and his 2 blades were already in hand. Newbies immediately blocked him as soon as he saw that Thisnik wanted to attack Jian Chen. He said coldly, Don't you dare harm Jian Chen when the great Newbies is here. Piss off. You're not my opponent. If I wanted to kill you, it would be as simple as squashing an ant. Thisnik's eyes were filled with disdain. He did not view newbies as someone worthy. How could the prideful newbies endure such provocation from Thisnik? A tremendous presence immediately began to radiate from him, and his gaze turned into a glare at that very moment. Killing intent began to surge without the slightest intention of restraint. Thisnik, there has never been a good outcome for those who dare to speak to the great newbies like that. To me, killing you is a piece of cake. If it weren't for the fact that someone had deposited that power in you, I really would be looking down on you, newbies growled. If it were some other time in some other place, I would definitely have a real battle with you and see just what you can do. Too bad it's not right now. I need to eliminate the ruler of the Turtle Clan, or I probably won't be able to leave this place after the Octoterra Emperor achieves full control. Newbies, I originally saved the Emperor's power for fighting over the legacy's inheritance, but now, I have to use it. I'll completely end the lives of you two with a strand now. A terrifying and pure power radiated from Thisnik. It floated out slowly, before gathering at his fingertip. This was an Emperor's power, the power a Saint Emperor deposited within him. At the same time, it was his greatest trump card. Just a strand of it was enough to heavily wound 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Kings. Newbie's complexion became extremely ugly. He could feel its power. It was certain death if he faced up against it. Thisnik stared at the power at his fingertip and said, It should be some type of great honor for you to die from a strand of Emperor's power. Newbies, Octoterra Emperor, I'll end your lives completely right now. Killing intent flickered wildly in Thisnik's eyes and he was about to shoot the power at them. However, a huge stone slab fell from the ceiling at this very moment, creating a boom as it struck the ground. Thisnik could not help but slow down due to the sudden occurrence. He looked up subconsciously. A huge hole was revealed in the ceiling of the hall that had been covered up by the stone. A gentle azure light glowed from within but nothing inside could be seen clearly. This is the center of the Octaterra Divine Hall. It's where the control center is. Thisnik could not help but call out. His face was filled with joy. Without any hesitation, he dispersed the power at his fingertip and shot into the hole. The azure light quickly disappeared after Thisnik had entered, and in a moment it had completely vanished with the hole disappearing as well. The ceiling also perfectly returned to how it was before. All that was left was a large stone slab lying on the ground now. I never thought that was actually the center of the Divine Hall. Newbie stared at the ceiling in dejection, while envy burned and flickered in his eyes. Unfortunately, Thisnik had the Emperor's power, which was strong enough to even destroy the Divine Hall. He did not dare to fight over it with him at all. The 9th floor of the hall became peaceful once again with Thisnika's disappearance. Only Jian Chen and newbies were still there. Currently, Jian Chen devoted all his efforts into absorbing the Blood Demon Emperor's remaining soul fragments. He placed all his attention on his sea of consciousness, completely unaware of the outside world. He was also unaware of the fact that Thisnik had entered the center of the Divine Hall. He would gain control over the hall without much time, allowing him to use the power of the Divine Hall as he wished. Jian Chen had no impression of time inside his sea of consciousness. All he could feel was that his soul was rapidly becoming stronger, while the residual soul fragments were rapidly growing weaker. Devouring one's soul was virtually unheard of. It unheard of on the Tian Yuan continent, as it basically would not happen in this world. The reason why the Blood Demon Emperor could devour both the Samic Emperor and the Octaterra Emperor's souls was because he had the Empyrean Demon Orb. Right now, the reason why Jian Chen could devour the Blood Demon Emperor's soul was because he had entered Jian Chen's sea of consciousness by himself. The collapsed soul would disperse into the surroundings with the death of its owner, but as it was in a different environment, Jian Chen's sea of consciousness, it was able to survive and linger. This was the reason why Jian Chen could absorb the soul. Jian Chen would not have been able to do this if it had occurred outside. The soul contained fragments of memories and some comprehensions of the mysteries of the world, so when Jian Chen absorbed the soul, he took these for himself. This allowed his comprehension of the laws of the world to skyrocket. Even though they were only incomplete fragments, they still came from the Blood Demon Emperor. Jian Chen benefited greatly from this, allowing his comprehension to shoot up to the level of a 7th heavenly layer saint rulers from the 1st heavenly layer where he had stagnated. He caught up with the 2nd layer of the chaotic body. Time passed silently. Jian Chen finally absorbed all of the Blood Demon Emperor's soul after some time, allowing his own soul to strengthen quickly. The only pity he felt was that he did not see any memories from the Samic Emperor or the Octaterra Emperor from the fragments of souls. It was as if the Blood Demon Emperor did not learn anything about their memories at all when he had devoured them in the first place. Jian Chen's sea of consciousness had stopped churning long ago. Only the Empyrean Demon Orb floated in there as it shone with a demonic red light. Jian Chen gathered his attention on the orb. The Empyrean Demon Orb clearly originated from the same era as the Azulate Sword Spirits. Jian Chen was extremely curious about its exact details. Ziying, Qingxua, so what is this Empyrean Demon Orb? Jian Chen asked the Sword Spirits. Right now, only the Sword Spirits could provide him with information regarding it, as even the Blood Emperor Demon had no idea about its true origins. All he knew was its name, and the fact that it was a special wondrous item. The Sword Spirits seemed to hesitate slightly before replying to Jian Chen's question. Master, the Empyrean Demon Orb was a famed treasure of the Empyrean Demon Monarch in the past. It was forged from her essence blood, and it's quite a powerful demon artifact. So who's this Empyrean Demon Monarch? Is she powerful? Why did her treasure end up here? Jian Chen asked. The Empyrean Demon Monarch was a demon monarch of the demon realm. Not only was she the greatest demoness, she was extremely powerful and stood at the peak of demon monarch, only an inch away from demon emperor. The Empyrean demon arts she created was extraordinary in power as well, and was considered one of the high-level cultivation methods in the demon realm at that time. The soul-devouring force cultivation method was infamous, able to kill on contact. It was extremely terrifying. This soul-devouring force is similar to the Chi of Slaughter and the Baleful Force Master knows. These two powers are all derived from the soul-devouring force, and are much weaker when compared to it. Just that afterward, a great battle occurred where we were. It was extremely intense, leading to the deaths of countless experts in the void. The Empyrean Demon Monarch also perished in that battle. We too find it extremely odd that her Empyrean demon orb would appear here. Newbie's venom seemed to be able to eat through everything. As soon as it came into contact with the ceiling, signs of corrosion immediately began to appear on the ceiling, which even Saint Kings struggled to break. It was eaten away at a visible rate. However, all it managed to do was corrode away the outermost layer, before being stopped by the structure that was filled with the Divine Hall's power. It stopped there. 2 arm-thick streams of lights, one silver and one golden, shot out from his mouth and struck the ceiling heavily. It produced a great boom. This attack was in no way weaker than the full-powered strike of a 3rd heavenly layer Saint King. At the same time, Jian Chen struck out with all his might. He rose up and his king armament viciously stabbed at the same area targeted by newbies. Boom! Wild ripples of energy knocked Jian Chen back and forced him back to the ground. However, the entrance to the hall's center remained fine. Other than the outer layer eaten away by newbies' poison, there was not even a mark. The entrance is as tough as the Divine Hall. We can't break through it with our current strength, Jian Chen said with a sunken face. His complexion was extremely ugly. Once Thisnik gained control over the Divine Hall, they would no longer have any ability to fight him. All they could do then was hide in the Saint artifact. Jian Chen had learned from the Blood Demon Emperor's memories that control over the hall meant control over its power. The hall's power could not be used to injure people outside, but it could be used however the person in control wished inside. Thisnik completely had the power to use it against them. The hall's supreme power was equivalent to the Emperor's power in Thisnik. Only Saint Emperors can break through this Divine Hall. Does that mean that only a Saint Emperor's power can break through this entrance as well? If that's the case, all we can do is watch helplessly as Thisnik gains control. Newbie's face was filled with regret. Chapter 937, Battle of Flame City, 1. Maybe there is one way we can break through this entrance, Jian Chen said with a dark face. Newbie's face lit up when he heard that. He looked at Jian Chen in interest and asked, Jian Chen, what other idea do you have? Find the Emperor armament, and then use its power to break through, said Jian Chen. Newbie's positivity drained very quickly. He looked at Jian Chen with a troubled expression. It's not like you don't know about the Emperor armament's power. We can't control it right now with our current strength. Even if we do have it under control, can it really break through the entrance? You have to remember that even the Emperor armament is currently stuck in the hole and unable to break out. That doesn't matter. We need to try it, because there are no better ideas. All we can do now is hope that the entrance to the center of the hall isn't too tough. However, we need to make breakthroughs before we go find the Emperor armament. When my chaotic body reaches the 3rd layer, the Emperor armament shouldn't be able to injure me anymore. I can control it easily by then, Jian Chen murmured. All right. I've reached the peak of Class 7 ages ago. If it weren't for the restrictions to enter the Divine Hall, I would have broken through long ago. We might be able to get through that entrance once we break through and use the Emperor armament, said newbies. Afterward, Jian Chen and newbies immediately entered the Saint artifact. They wanted to reach Saint King in a single stroke. The Saint artifact was extremely tough. By hiding in it, Thisnik would struggle to break through it temporarily, even if he controlled the Divine Hall and used it to attack the artifact. As a result, the Saint artifact had now become Jian Chen and newbies' only line of defense. Jian Chen sat in the center of an extremely peaceful hall in the Saint artifact. Mountainous piles of high-class monster cores and grand-quality crystal coins were stacked around him, with fist-sized divine-quality crystals sandwiched in between. These were the items Jian Chen needed to rely on the most to break through. They could provide Jian Chen with tremendous quantities of energy. As long as he had enough time, he could break through successfully. The 1st layer of the chaotic body gave me the strength of a 3rd heavenly layer Saint Ruler, while the 2nd layer elevated my power to the 7th heavenly layer. With a ruler armament, I could display the strength of the 9th heavenly layer, and the 3rd heavenly layer of Saint King when coupled with a king armament instead. I should be able to skip through the 8th and 9th heavenly layers and directly arrive at Saint King with the 3rd layer of the chaotic body. I just wonder how strong I'll become when I use the king armament, Jian Chen thought. He was filled with anticipation. And there's also the Emperor armament. It's already terrifying enough when no one's in control. I wonder how strong I'll become if I use it after I break through. Will I be strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Hall Elders? The golden silk mail is still with a divine general of the Serpent God Hall. I might not know how to strengthen it, but it's a unique treasure that the world has given birth to. It's also related to a calamity. When I get strong enough, I have to personally pay a visit to the Serpent God Hall and get it back. Jian Chen felt rather urgent about it.
He knew that it would not be far until that day would come. Once he broke through, he should possess enough power to fight the 4 divine generals if he used the Emperor armament.
Cultivating, I need to quickly cultivate. I need to reach the 3rd layer as soon as possible this time. Otherwise, let alone getting the golden silk mail back, I won't even be able to leave this divine hall alive. Jian Chen quickly dismissed his thoughts, devoting all his attention to concentration. The sword spirit materialized above his head as they assisted him in the refinement of the monster cores, crystal coins, and crystals. A faint smell of blood lingered from the mountainous piles of monster cores. He had taken them all from the bodies of the vicious beasts from the hall recently, so the energy in each monster core was extremely active. It made refinement even easier. As time was tight, Jian Chen only used freshly harvested monster cores, and not the ancient ones that had solidified from the Saint artifact. They were all high-class monster cores, but quite a lot of their energy had leaked away and solidified. This was why it would take great effort and time to refine them. It was unsuitable for the current situation. Newbies did not just sit around as Jian Chen refined the monster cores. He cultivated quietly in another peaceful hall, using a different method of cultivation to Jian Chen. He absorbed the hidden essence in the old snake from the beast god continent. The entire process was much easier compared to Jian Chen, and it was faster as well. The center of the divine hall was a very small room. It was empty and without any furniture. The only thing present was a shrunken divine hall that floated in the center 1 meter in the air. The divine hall still possessed a tremendous aura, but it was extremely small. It was less than a meter in length and width. If someone familiar with the divine hall had discovered it, they would realize that it was the Octaterra divine hall but shrunken down by countless times. Thisnik currently sat with his legs crossed before this tiny version of the hall. His energy flowed unceasingly into the hall. Octaterra Emperor, never did I think you'd still be alive, and that your legacy was all just a trick you set up. We've all been tricked by you. But so what? The power of an emperor is present in my body. Chapter 938, Battle of Flame City, 2. The Vice City Lord of Flame City currently led a group of flame mercenaries to personally welcome the guests that had come from everywhere. The happiest and most excited person among all the guests would without a doubt be the king of Jizum Kingdom. He was filled with excitement that he struggled to suppress as he gazed at the mighty city walls and the various organizations that stood on the apex of the Tianyuan continent. He had never even heard about many of these organizations. The smile on his face never disappeared. The source of his joy was the fact that the first Vice City Lord of the most valuable city in all of history was his daughter, Yu Yu. Everyone had agreed in unison over the matter of Yu Yu taking up the position, with no one against the suggestion. Flame City only existed because of Jian Chen, while Yu Yu was Jian Chen's fiancée, the person closest to him. Her management abilities were outstanding as well, impressive in all aspects, so she was most suitable for taking up the position. It could be said that other than Yu Yu, there was no one else suitable for the position of Vice City Lord. The uniqueness and value of the city made it so that it could not end up in the hands of outsiders no matter what. Although no one knew where Jian Chen was due to the matters regarding the winged tiger god, it did not sully the glory of Flame City. It was the only structure with city walls made completely out of tungsten alloy. It was equivalent to the 7 capitals that had existed for countless years on the Tianyuan continent. The ancient clan of Tianmu has come. The ancient clan of Mogan has come. More and more people gathered inside Flame City. These people arrived from various large organizations as the heavy, clear voice rang out. Changyang Zhu Yunkong and Bai Hai currently sat together in the huge imperial palace at the center of the city as they conversed over wine. They both smiled without restraint, observing the beautifully decorated hall from time to time. They were both at ease. Never did I think that my grandson would be so daring, to actually create such a great city out of tungsten alloy. This is unbelievable. Chongyang-zu Yunkong sighed. He was extremely happy. A happy smile also formed on Bai Hai's face when he heard that. That kid is quite good, especially with his talent in cultivation. It's unprecedented, using less than 30 years to reach Saint Ruler. His future accomplishments will definitely exceed what we can imagine. Bai Hai seemed to think of something as he reached there and sighed gently. It's a pity that he got sucked into the matters regarding the winged tiger god. The entire continent is looking for him now. Although he has hidden himself somewhere beyond the continent, even we don't know if he has come across any dangers. All we can do is hope he returns safely. Chongyang-zu Yunkong's happiness gradually disappeared when he heard that.
He said with a frown, "The matter regarding the winged tiger god is indeed troublesome. There are just too many things that connect to it. Unless he obtains power that can rival the 10 protector clans, he'll only be able to hand over the winged tiger god if he wants to return to the continent." Bai Hai and Chongyang-zu Yunkong had learned of each other's identities long ago. They were both grandfathers of Jian Chen if they looked at their position in the family hierarchy. Thus, they were members of the same family through Jian Chen even though they had different ages. Ming Dong, Du Gufeng, Little Fatty, and Tai Ta all gathered in a garden within the palace. Unknowingly, a few years passed just like that. "I wonder where Jian Chen is, and if he's well or not," the white-clothed Ming Dong murmured. Not only had Ming Dong's strength increased greatly after the few years of secluded cultivation, even his bearing underwent changes unknowingly. He had become less rash and more composed than before, seeming more modest and mature now. "Don't worry, he'll be fine for sure." A cold voice rang out. It was the prideful Du Gufeng. He was no different from before. Today is the important day that Flame City is formally established. As the first one in history to be constructed entirely out of tungsten alloy, news of it has spread through the continent long ago. Jian Chen might not know. "Do you think Jian Chen would hurry back?" Little Fatty said. He was filled with anticipation. All his fatty tissue from before could no longer be seen. His chubby stature from before had disappeared completely as well. He had become even more solidly built. Little Fatty's talent was very great. As Uncle Xiao refused to let him into the matters of the Tianyuan continent and had only wanted him to spend his life peacefully, his talent had been suppressed. However, now that he began to cultivate arduously, his rate of improvement was heavenly. Although it could not be compared with Tai Ta, it was not a speed that ordinary people could even consider. "When Jian Chen comes back, I want to have a solid fight with him and see whether I'm stronger or he is." Tai Ta sat there like a mountain as he said with a soft voice. Excitement flickered in his eyes. At this moment, Tai Ta was the most powerful person among all of them. Even Ming Dong was not his opponent. His brute force was particularly great, even more terrifying than that of magical beasts. "Tai Ta, if you want to fight with Jian Chen, you better devote your efforts to reaching Saint Ruler first. You may be strong, but there's a difficult gap to cross between Saint Ruler and Heaven Saint Masters," Ming Dong joked. "I'm not scared. Right now, I feel like I can defeat ordinary Saint Rulers. Once Jian Chen gets back, I need to try him and see just how great the difference between the two of us still is." When we were at Kargath Academy, the difference wasn't this big. "I hope Jian Chen doesn't pull too far ahead." Tai Ta was confident. He could not help but think back to the time when he was at Kargath Academy with Jian Chen. With that, he could not help but reveal an idiotic smile on his honest-looking face as he reminisced. Half a day later, Yu Yu finally had some time to rest. She had been busy with receiving the guests. With a purple dress, she currently sat wearily in a seat as she rubbed her temples. As the Vice City Lord of Flame City, she needed to personally receive many people who had come from hermit or even ancient clans. This was why she was so tired. After so many years, Yu Yu had changed greatly as well. She was now even more mature than before, while her beauty was still as enchanting. It was enough to cause the hearts of countless men to run wild. Vaguely enough, there was even the unique bearing of an upper echelon member present on her. Her temperament had silently undergone changes after these years of managing and being in charge of the Flame Mercenaries. "Sister Yu Yu, Lianer is so happy. The day which our Flame City can stand on the Tianyuan continent has finally arrived. We've looked forward to this day for so many years,
And it's finally come true, a gentle voice sounded. Bai Lian ran over energetically in a luxurious long dress. Yu Yu slowly sat up and said, all the people that came this time has surprised me greatly. But, Yu Yu then paused as her eyebrows furrowed slightly. Sister Yu Yu, but what? Bai Lian asked curiously as she blinked her large round eyes. But for some reason, I suddenly have an uneasy feeling, as if something bad is about to happen, said Yu Yu. Bai Lian stared blankly as she thought slightly with a frown when she heard that. She then said, Sister Yu Yu, you're worrying too much. Everyone on the Tian Yuan continent knows that we have a protector clan backing up our mercenaries. I'm pretty sure no one will come looking for trouble. You're right, but why can't I let this uneasiness inside me be laid to rest? Yu Yu murmured as she thought. Bai Lian rolled her eyes and giggled. Sister Yu Yu, you can't be missing my brother, right? Yu Yu's face became flushed as she faked her anger. Stop spilling nonsense, you. 20 kilometers away from the city, a large group had suddenly appeared at this moment. They were extremely numerous, extending as far as the eye could see with densely packed people. There were at least several millions of them. They currently traveled quickly in the direction of Flame City in a fan shape, bearing a threatening and aggressive manner. Over 20 people of different ages rode at the very front of the group. They were all on large, Class 5 magical beasts as they approached Flame City. Every single person seemed extremely ordinary, without a rippling of energy from their bodies. They all seemed like people who could not cultivate. However, it was not difficult to see their areas of extraordinaire when observed in detail. Every single movement of every single person seemed to conceal and abide to the laws of the world indescribably, as if they were using the energy of the world. All of them were at least saint rulers. At the very center of them was a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. His face was cold, while a sneer hung on his face. Killing intent poured without restraint from him. He was Bai Jian. Prince Bai Jian, there are countless experts gathered at Flame City right now. Are you sure they won't end up helping the Flame mercenaries if we strike at this moment? An old man beside Bai Jian asked with a deep voice. He was stern. Don't worry at all. I have a notice written up personally by the protector clans. Unless those hermit or ancient clans no longer want to stay on the continent, they won't disobey the commands from the protector clans, Bai Jian sneered. He had never looked away from the mighty city as he spoke. He was filled with hatred. Flame City is the first city to be built purely out of tungsten alloy on the continent. TSK. What extravagance. Jian Chen, I'll be taking this tungsten alloy city that you spent countless years and manpower to build, with the entire continent as the audience. This is your outcome for taking my love. The killing intent and hatred in Bai Jian's heart had already surged to his limits. He was clenching his fists so tightly that his nails had already pierced through his skin. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.